2013, here we are at the prestigious NHL Awards. Ray Shero wins GM of the Year, which, notably, is voted on prior to the conference finals. Crosby gets the Ted Lindsay for his spectacular regular season, but unfortunately Brooks Orpik shooting him in the face cost him the heart. The Pens don't have a first-round pick at the draft, but we'll see about second-round pick Tristan Jarry and third-rounder Jake Gensel. The Pens only had a second, which they traded up to get Jarry, thanks to RFA Tyler Kennedy. Pittsburgh sent TK to San Jose for a second, which, they know he's not a 20-goal scorer anymore, right? I like Kennedy, but let's be real, this is robbery for the Pens. But who knows, change of scenery. Come free agency, all the rentals from the 2013 all-in push move on. Again led to the Bruins, Doug Murray to the Canadiens, and Brandon Morrow eventually signs with the Bolts. Morrow's lagging playoff performance has been explained by a kneecap injury that hobbled him. Matt Cook is on the way out too, signing a 3-year contract worth $2.5 million per, which for a guy that plays like Cook, going into his age 35 season, is pretty rich. Get your bag, man. To offset the departures, the Penguins do make a pretty big free agent signing. Scuds is back. He's now a 2-time Cup winner, and though he's 35, his game never really relied on speed. He blocks shots, he complements strong right-handed D-men. He'll likely slot in as a bottom-pairing guy behind Martin, Letang, Orpik, and Niskanen. It signals the Penguins are kinda lukewarm on Simone Dupre at this point, but he's still very young. Scuderi is extremely solid. He's not in his prime, but he should still be a good player. But that contract is not great. 3.375 times 4 years. He's going to be 39 when this contract is over. The rate is fine, but that term is absurd. But this is a team that needs to win now. People, including myself, are starting to look at the Penguins' brass with a critical lens. Shero is signing this contract with the idea that it'll either work and he'll be a genius, or it'll be somebody else's problem. That's about it for the offseason unless you have strong opinions on Chuck Kobasu, which you shouldn't. The preseason begins, and with it comes bad news. A blood clot in Tomas Vokun's pelvis. He won't be available to start the season. He won't be available for a while. It's Marc-Andre Fleury's net once again. The backup mantle falls to Wilkes-Barre Scranton starter Jeff Zatkoff, who has been quite good as an AHL goalie, but has zero NHL experience. The tertiary option becomes Jeff Delorier, who the Penguins would really prefer stayed in Wilkes. A knee injury will keep Letang out on opening night too, but teenager Olli Maatta has made the team out of camp and does bolster the defense, though he's obviously nowhere near a Letang-level player. Funny story about Maatta. When my aunt and uncle went to the 2012 draft in Pittsburgh, the prospects were signing various things for everyone. Maatta took my uncle and aunt's signing sheet and put a massive signature on it, taking up a big portion of the page. Oh great, they thought. This doofus just covered the whole page. Lo and behold, late in the first, Maatta donned a Pens jersey for the first time, and his massive signature wasn't nearly as big of an inconvenience. Olli is a strong player, sound beyond his years with a good shot. It's pretty impressive that he leapfrogged the top 10 pick Pouliot. The Pens are running it back, but this is really this group's last kick at the can. Bilesma and Shero's seats are both decently hot. Humiliation in the playoffs again is not an option, especially with both superstars fully healthy. The regular season, frankly, doesn't matter. New division alignment? Neat. Surprising to no one, the Penguins are still a monstrous regular season team from the moment Chuck Kobasu scores the season-opening goal. One of two he'll score with the Penguins. Neal goes down in Game 1, but the team doesn't miss a beat, winning 3 straight games to start the season, with a hat trick by Jokinen in Game 3 against the Canes being the high point. Hey, Jussi, I forgot you're still here. That's great, especially now that you can play in the top 6. Zatkoff gets shelled by the first overall pick-bound Panthers for the Pens' first loss. Unnerving, but the gang keeps trucking. The Penguins alternate stretches of wins and shorter stretches of losses. 4 wins, 3 losses. 4 wins, 3 losses. They've struggled to find offense in a few games, but honestly, it was mostly them getting goalied. Neal is back, Letang is back, we're good to go. And just as expected, after a win and a loss, the Penguins commence a stretch where they go 24-1. They are just a really good team. Sid is healthy, he's the best player in the world by a fairly wide margin. Malkin is very likely number 2. Neal, Kunitz, Jokinen, and Dupuis are terrific complements in the top 6. I haven't really touched on it much. I've focused more on Neal as the star winger, but Kunitz is a beast. At 34 years old, he's better than ever. He and Dupuis match the famously tenacious Crosby in work ethic. He's a tremendous forechecker and has much better small game skills than he's usually given credit for. The Penguins' top line will finish second in the league in expected goals percentage among forward lines that have played over 250 minutes. For what it's worth, the Malkin line with Jokinen and Neal will finish 12th.
Hang on to it, Bozak all over him. Neal, score!
The Penguins marched through a couple weeks without Malkin and a good chunk of the monster stretch without either of their top two D-men, with Martin and Letang both suffering injuries. It's Niskanen and Mata who have risen to the occasion. Niskanen has slotted in as the quarterback on the number 1 power play unit with number 1 ice time, while Mata plays on the second unit and is a very solid number 2 for a teenager. Orpik and Scuderi are also on the team, both really struggling when not with a strong partner. The bottom 6 is pretty ugly too, but the top 6's dominance has thrown a blanket over that. While Cook and Kennedy weren't superstars, they were NHL players that Brandon Sutter is desperately missing on his wing. This season, it's just been a random smattering of players. Jason Megna and Bo Bennett? No. Chuck Kobasu, Zach Sill, Chris Connor. Remember him from a couple years ago? What about Taylor Pyatt off waivers? None of them really click. Zach Sill is funny, though.
Attaboy, Dion! Coming in your corner 3! Every time!
The only guy that really makes an impact is Brian Gibbons, a speedy 25-year-old out of Boston College, who works hard, is good in his own end, and has a decent scoring touch. The fourth line of Glass, Vitale, and Adams is spectacularly bad at driving offense, but they don't generally allow many chances either, so that's nice. The biggest negative of the dominant stretch is a major injury to Pascal Dupuis, who obliterated his knee late in December. Torn ACL, MCL, and PCL. It rules him out for the season, but that isn't the end of it. An article by Dupuis for the Players Tribune chronicles his experience. Dupuis, a workout and conditioning freak, waiting for surgery on his mangled knee, got cranking on the arm bike. He shrugged off the massive chest pain he was experiencing and finished his workout. He shrugged off his coughing fits while trying to sleep. He called over his chiropractor to try and fix what he thought was damaged ribs, but the chiropractor immediately knew something was wrong. This wasn't structural damage. After Dupuis' trainer contacted his primary care doctor, the doctor ordered Dupuis to go to the hospital immediately and have his wife drive him. Duper, not wanting to disturb his wife or kids, shrugged it off and drove himself. At the hospital, the doctors discovered a clot in his lung. Dupuis had had a pulmonary embolism. Had the clot gone to his brain or heart, it could have had devastating consequences. Dupuis shrugged it off once again, annoyed mostly by the fact that his need for blood thinners would delay his knee surgery. The man just wants to play hockey at any cost. On the topic of blood clots, it seems like Vokun could be returning soon, or at least in time for the playoffs. The Penguins cool off a bit after the new year, going merely 8-3-2 between January 10th and the Olympic break. Brian Gibbons is the man tasked with replacing Dupuis and is perfectly good. Hey, it's that time again. The Olympics go very well for Sid, Kunitz, and Canada. It's good for Jokinen and Mata with Finland. They don't go particularly well for Malkin, whose Russians go without a medal on home ice, or the U.S. Penguins representatives, Shiro, Bilesma, Granato, Martin, and Orpik, who dropped the bronze medal game to those Finns. But at least Bilesma and Peter Laviolette are friends now. As was the case following the 2010 Olympics, the turnaround to the trade deadline is almost instantaneous. So who are the Penguins tied to this year? Will Shiro's hot seat cause him to go for the big guns once again? There really isn't much to pick through in terms of needle movers, and the Pens don't seem all too interested in the struggling Marian Gaborik or an already traded once Thomas Vanek. Ales Hemsky seems like a maybe and is who I personally would want to slot into the Dupuis-shaped hole, but there's always the possibility he doesn't have the motor to mesh with Crosby. According to Rob Rossi, then of the Trib, Penguins scout Don Waddell is looking into Marek Zidlicki to fill in for Letang, who, continuing the trend of blood clots, just had a stroke, likely putting him out for the season. The Penguins do have one massive target in mind: Ryan Kesler.
It over, right back to Kessler. Wrist shot, scores! Another long shot goal against Newman.
Ever since trading Jordan Staal, the Penguins have really missed their 3-star center arrangement. Sutter is a typical third-line center. He's fine, but he can't create his own offense or elevate guys like Stahl could. Ryan Kesler is an extremely similar player to Stahl in terms of impact. He can score, he can defend, but he's also an all-around menace, widely loathed by anyone he plays against. While he's not necessarily the 40-goal Selke winner he was in 2011, he's still a beast. Vancouver likes Sutter a lot. Rossi reported the price for Kesler to be Sutter, a first, a third, and either Simone Dupre or the quietly blossoming Brian Dumoulin. The glut of injuries has made Shiro more desperate. Kesler would only be a rental, but the Flyers are also in the hunt for the Canuck and are dangling Braden Shen. Maybe the Pens need to pull the trigger. But then again, the Penguins could likely coast to the top spot in the new Metropolitan Division without Kesler. And do they really want to give up Dupre or Dumoulin? Does Shiro mortgage the team's future for one last kick at the can to save his job? Or does he hold on to guys for a future that he likely won't be a part of unless there's a deep playoff run? Shiro stays pat. Kesler isn't moved. Sutter, the young D-man, and the top pick stay with the Pens. So who did he get instead? Neither Zidlichky nor Hemsky. Zidlichky didn't move, and Hemsky ends up in Ottawa, which is strange. Whatever. To address their needs on the fourth line, the Penguins add veteran center Marcel Goc. Goc is maybe the least exciting player in the NHL, but he's very effective. He's essentially just an upgraded version of the Penguins' current fourth liners. No ability to drive offense, but a terrific defender with a bit more of a scoring touch than the man he's replacing, Joe Vitale, whose only goal came back in December. The German costs the Pens a third and a fifth. To theoretically replace Dupuis, at least until the injured but slightly more interesting Bo Bennett returns to the lineup, is Lee Stempniak. Sure. Okay. Stempniak is not a bad player, but he's been way overtasked playing top-line minutes on a pretty bad Flames team. He has 8 goals, can kill some penalties, and would fit much better in the Penguins' bottom 6 than on Sid's wing. But we shall see. He only cost a third.
Bouwmeester, back release, Stempniak scores!
After the trade deadline gluttony in 2013, it's hard to get too excited over Marcel Goc and Lee Stempniak, but they both address a need and were cheap. It's pretty impressive restraint from Shiro, honestly. The Pens lose Malkin for the home stretch late in March. He'll be back in time for the playoffs, but once again, the Penguins don't really get to hammer out their post-deadline lines. Neal is up with Crosby at times, Jokinen is at center, Gibbons is all over the place, Bo Bennett is back and trying to find his place in the world. Letang, astonishingly, returns in April. Despite the fact that he had a stroke just 2 months prior, he's still a beast. Vokun is getting some reps in Wilkes, just a couple games on a conditioning stint. He likely won't play in the playoffs, barring some catastrophe, as Fleury has been perfectly solid despite his heavy workload, and Zatkoff has proven to be a competent backup. The Penguins seem almost bored in the home stretch. Crosby is miles ahead of everyone in the scoring race with 104 points versus Ryan Getzlaf's 87 in second place. The Pens can't really catch the Bruins for first in the East, nor can they really be caught for first in the Metro. Everyone knows what the deal is, though. The playoffs are all that matters for this team, and they're mostly healthy, aside from now Marcel Goc and Dupuis, of course, and they're ready to take on all comers. The Penguins' first-round opponent is entering their second-ever playoff series in hopes for their first-ever playoff win, the Columbus Blue Jackets. The CBJ are the Penguins' little brothers, especially now that they've moved over to the Eastern Conference. Columbus is the closest team geographically to Pittsburgh, right around a 3-hour drive. The Jackets are a very new team, just joining the league at the turn of the millennium, meaning many Ohioans, particularly those in the eastern part of the state, were already Penguins fans when the new guys moved to town. And the Jackets proceeding to suck for the first decade plus of their existence didn't help garner much interest. The tickets in Columbus, due to them often sucking, also tend to be much cheaper than those in Pittsburgh, incentivizing some from Western PA to make the trek out to Central Ohio. These factors all contribute to Nationwide Arena in Columbus serving as a second home for the Penguins, often overrun by fans donning the black and gold. Understandably, this is pretty annoying for Columbus fans, who have very quickly learned to loathe the Penguins and their fans. But who actually is this Columbus team? The Jackets are a group that found their identity in one acquisition. Remember back in 2012, when the Penguins were melting down against the Flyers and Ilya Bryzgalov was playing badly, but the Flyers stuck with him because they didn't trust his backup? Sergei Bobrovsky, that's right. He's the reigning Vezina winner now.
Johansson looking for Ovechkin. Wow. Nice glove stop there. A dandy.
Columbus gave up a second and 2/4 to Philadelphia in the summer of 2012 to obtain Bobrovsky, what seemed like a fairly high price at the time, and they never looked back. Bob has been electric for the Jackets. He won the Vezina in 2013, and had the Jackets made the playoffs, he would have likely won the MVP. He was their best player again this season, well above league average across the board, and the Jackets have molded their identity around him. The Jackets assume, rightly, that Bob is going to stop more chances than the goalie at the other end. As a result, Columbus tries to make their games as low event as possible, with the hope that their solid finishers up front can tilt the games just slightly in their favor. While it probably wasn't what they had imagined at the start of the season with Nathan Horton, career-ending concussion, and Marian Gaborik traded, so far, it's worked. They aren't a great team. They wouldn't be playing the Penguins if they were, but their PDO of 100.7 was just good enough to tip some one-goal games and steal some loser points. The Jackets' best skater this season has been former 4th overall pick Ryan Johansson, who stepped up from a meat-and-potatoes defensive player to a 30-goal scoring two-way force. James Wisniewski and Jack Johnson anchor the defense, with one having terrific underlying numbers to go with a 51-point season, and the other being Jack Johnson, who despite his questionable play on the ice, does pass the vibe check. That's the high-end talent outside of Bob. The rest of the team are just a bunch of guys that you'd love to have on your team, but you don't necessarily fear them. 9 to 22 goals and 24 to 50 points from all 8 guys other than Johansson in the top 9. Those categories are led by Artem Anisimov and famed Crosby hater Brandon Dubinsky, respectively. The rest of the defense, Fedor Tutin, 20-year-old rookie Ryan Murray, David Savard, and Nikita Nikitin are all very good at making sure nothing happens, good or bad, while they're on the ice. The Jackets should give the Penguins a fight, but let's be honest, nobody is picking the Jackets in this series. But Columbus comes out fighting in Game 1. Jack Johnson scores a terrific goal to open the scoring and shut me up.
Around in front. Oh, and a jet play. They score. Jack Johnson.
Malkin feeds Jokinen to respond, but Jack Johnson is flying, and he sets up former Penguin Mark Letestu to rip the lead right back. But early in the second, the Pens have a power play with a chance to tie it.
And then he's stripped of the puck. Moving back in is McKenzie. He scores!
Letang gets his minutes cut because of this play, as the Penguins opt to ride the much more reliable Paul Martin. Well, I guess the Penguins still have a power play.
Niskanen a shot. He scores!
And Jack gives them another.
Niskanen shoots. Score!
What a season so far for Niskanen. He's getting a massive contract in the summer, whether it's with Pittsburgh or elsewhere. Mark, how's it going? Fleury locks in, highlighted by a massive poke check on a Matt Calvert breakaway late in the second. In the third, you know what time it is.
Cross now to Sutter. Score!
You thought it was going to be a Fleury collapse, didn't you? No more. Mark stonewalls the Jackets, and the Penguins hold on to make Sutter's goal the game winner. Game 2, and the Penguins hope to continue stamping out the Jackets' hopes. Bang, Brian Gibbons. Bang, Gibbons again. This kid rocks. He works hard, he can motor, he can play with Sid. He's the great value Dupuis. This is the Brian Gibbons game. What's that? He's hurt? And Johansson scored on the same power play? Why? But there's a laser by Niskanen to put the game firmly back into the Penguins' hands. Bob knows he's good, right? Matt Calvert scores Columbus' second shorty of the season to tighten the game, but Fleury's on. The Penguins try to break out the prevent defense just to preserve their lead, playing a more passive game, and it works until late in the third, when the Jackets have a hero.
Flips it back in front, Jenner with a shot, Johansson swings it across, they score! Jack Johnson, tie game!
The game heads to OT, and both goalies play some terrific hockey. Early in the second OT, the Penguins' problem pairing of Letang and Scuderi gets exploited, and Calvert is allowed too many chances. It was not the Brian Gibbons game. It was the Matt Calvert game. The style of play in overtime favors the purposefully bland Blue Jackets. Avoiding OT entirely is probably a good idea for the Pens. Game 3 at Nationwide Arena in Columbus, and the Jackets fans have not allowed the Yinzers to take over. The Columbus faithful are desperate to see a competitive team, and they're out in full force for just the glimmer of hope that they've been given. The fans ignite the Jackets. Johansson, Boone Jenner, and Jack Skilly isolate Mata while Niskanen watches on, presumably cheering for Ole to stop them. Columbus gets to Mata and Niskanen on their next shift too. It's Jack Johnson, baby. He's playing out of his mind. He's put the Penguins on the ropes. Pittsburgh calls their timeout, but even a 2-goal lead is a horrifying situation to be in against Bob. The Jackets don't let up, but Mark holds his team in it. He's going toe-to-toe with one of the best in the world. Deeper and deeper into the second period we go, and still the score remains 2-0. With just 2 seconds left in the period, Orpik backpedals past a sprawling Cam Atkinson and whips a shot past Bobrovsky. The Pens finally have something to show for their chances, but the bounces are just going Columbus's way as a puck ricochets off Atkinson and into the Penguins' goal. Just when things look bleak, Sutter is here to save the day.
Bennett's on the puck on the right side. Leaves it for Martin, a full slapper score with the fucking in front, I think, by Sutter. Let's wait and find out.
Pittsburgh is revitalized, and bang, Lee Stempniak ties the game with his first career playoff goal. Just a minute later, a low shot from Mata rips off Jokinen, waffles off Wisniewski, and tumbles into the net behind Bob to give the Penguins the lead. Despite the attempted heroics from Dubinsky, the Pens hold on thanks to 2 of their goal scorers with a block by Jokinen and a clear by Orpik. A bit of a fright there, but the Pens are back in control of the series. Another win in Columbus would essentially wrap this up. From the drop, the Pens are battering the Jackets in Game 4. Craig Adams scores, and you know things are dire for Columbus. Kunitz on the power play, then Malkin, Jokinen, and Neal eat the Jackets up. Just over halfway through the first, the Pens have a 3-0 lead and seem to be well on their way to a commanding 3-1 lead in the series. Deflection goal on the power play by Boone Jenner. That's nice. Who are the Penguins playing in the next round? Oh, the Flyers and Rangers are having a nice series. New York has been better so far, but Philadelphia is getting Steve Mason back in net. Could change the series. Anyway, back to the Pens, and it looks like Columbus has tightened the game a bit, but time's running out. What, are we going to get those same Dubinsky heroics from Game 3?
Fleury couldn't play it. Johansson centers, score! Dubinsky ties the game with 22.5 seconds.
In OT, Fleury gives up his first bad goal of the series.
Penguin line, shoots, he scores! Foligno wins it in overtime. This series is tied at 2.
It's a knuckle puck, but man, wish he got that one. Suddenly, this is a 3-game series. I'm not one to just throw stuff like this out there. I usually try to give stars some leeway because there are plenty of people giving them a rash already, and, they are the best players on the team. But where's Sid? He's the best player in the world, and yeah, he has 4 assists, but they're all secondary, and he's losing the possession battle. Dubinsky is really getting to Crosby. He's a great matchup center, and with the Penguins' lack of depth, they can't afford to have one of their lines be absent. There's also the Dupuis-sized hole that I've mentioned before. Dupuis gets ragged on a lot as a Crosby merchant, but there's an art to playing with superstars, an art Dupuis had mastered. Stempniak, though he's playing well when in the bottom 6, isn't working on the top line. Gibbons is hurt. Bilesma has opted to put Malkin on Sid's wing at times, double shifting the two-headed monster. Well, Gotch is back. He'll win some face-offs, I guess. Here we go, Game 5, the hinge point of the series. Brooks Orpik is out, and Robert Bortuzzo is in, and...
Loose puck, reaches for it. Loose again, backhanded in by Jenner. And Jenner...
I'm officially filled with dread. The Penguins stop messing around. They dominate the rest of the game, controlling over 70% of the even-strength expected goals. Bob is playing out of his mind, but finally Kunitz knocks a goal in on a 4th chance opportunity halfway through the second. The game remains tied into the third, but it's clear it's going to take a gaffe from the Columbus skaters to get one past the Jackets' impenetrable goalie. Yep, that'll do it.
Bobrovsky rebounded for a knockdown for the Penguins. Jokinen. He found that biscuit. You see Jokinen.
The Penguins keep pressing. They don't go into a shell, and Fleury holds strong for Chris Letang to ice it with an empty netter. Why is this so hard? Why are the Penguins making this so hard? Fleury is playing well, the Jackets aren't that great, the Penguins have to come out and end this in dominant fashion in Game 6. Bob is good. I know. I also don't care. Finally, the two-headed monster line proves too much for Columbus. Malkin scores twice in the first period. Sutter scores a heartbreaking shorthanded adjacent goal at the very start of the second. One more, please, Gino.
Left side going to the net, moves in. Hey! Shoots and scores the hat trick.
Halfway through the third, Teuton makes it 4-1, but the response is muted. They already know this is over. Artem Anisimov, hey! You've been getting your lunch eaten by Malkin and company. It's good to see you, even if you're making the game 4-2. Nick Foligno makes it 4-3 in the final 5 minutes. The Jackets are coming with a force. It's up to you, Marc-Andre. But it doesn't fall to Fleury. The Penguins insulate their goalie, who makes standard saves when he needs to. The Penguins hold on. They've survived the Blue Jackets. It only rarely felt in doubt, but man, that did not fill me with much confidence. Well, I guess it's time to see who survived the Rangers-Flyers series.
The New York Rangers move on to face Pittsburgh for the first time in 6 years.
I'm surprised it's taken us this long, but let's meet the 2014 New York Rangers. Who could we start with other than Henrik Lundqvist? He's maybe the best goalie alive with a spectacular track record in the playoffs over the last 2 seasons. His terrific play in a tight Game 7 against the Flyers allowed the Rangers to advance. But unlike the Jackets, who just said, "You can do it, Bob," this is a solid team in front of Lundqvist. They're still adjusting to new coach Alain Vigneault's stylings, but this is a deep, deep roster at all positions. They even have maybe the best backup in the league in Cam Talbot. The Rangers are a team of 3 very good second lines. The top line, if there really is one, is burner Chris Kreider, reliable Derek Stepan, and star scorer Rick Nash, who hasn't quite clicked yet in New York. Kreider is currently out, but should be back soon, so there's some shuffling, but his slot in the top 6 has been filled by a variety of players. Effort player Dominic Moore, rookie JT Miller, or sometimes the gigantic Brian Boyle. There is also another major change from the regular season. Ryan Callahan, the Rangers' captain, heart, and soul through the Tortorella era, was traded alongside a huge draft pick haul in a massive deadline deal with Tampa for Martin St. Louis. While Captain Cal was a beloved minute muncher and secondary scorer, Marty St. Louis is a star. That trade was 2014's answer to the Iginla trade in 2013, with the haul being a good bit larger because A, Marty is under contract for next season, and B, though he is 38, he won the scoring title just last year. His production hasn't dipped at all. At least it hadn't until he became a Ranger. Just 1 goal and 8 points in 19 games after being at nearly a point per game through the first 3 quarters of the season with Tampa. They tried him with Nash and Stepan since Kreider was injured. Didn't work. They tried him with Zuccarello and Brassard. Really didn't work. And they finally settled on just plopping him in Callahan's spot beside good but overpaid Brad Richards and speedster Carl Hagelin, which has worked well in the playoffs so far. Overall, a good, very deep forward unit with the potential to be great should they put it all together. The defense follows the same depth trend. They're led by the guy who is probably the Rangers' best skater in the uber-dependable Ryan McDonough, who makes amazingly few mistakes. Mark Stahl, Dan Girardi, Anton Strawman, Kevin Klein, John Moore, not exactly the sexiest names, but all very good players, all of which you're not necessarily afraid of putting against the opposition's stars. The Rangers are a good team, but one that seems unsteady as a whole despite the reliability of its parts. A team that hasn't really hit its stride or full potential. A team the Penguins should be able to overpower. With this series starting in Pittsburgh, the Penguins have decided to give out yellow? Gold? Colored shirts to the fans in attendance? The mustard out doesn't exactly have the same punch as the white out, but good effort. The blue shirts strike first on a strong shot from Benoit Pouliot, who left Mata in the dust. The Finns' tough period continues as forechecking master Carl Hagelin eats him up in the corner and sets up Brad Richards to make it 2-0. The Yellow Sea falls silent. But they come alive early in the second as Lee Stempniak scores a genuine highlight reel goal. James Neal evens the game soon after with a strange, kind of fluky goal which sends Lundqvist on a tirade about a phantom high stick. With the game tied, it's time for Fleury and Lundqvist to go toe-to-toe. Mark faces the higher quality chances while there's a higher quantity of shots against Hank. The game reaches OT, but it doesn't last long, as the Rangers score not one, but 2 OT winners. For what it's worth, it's Brassard's goal that counts. I regret to inform everyone, but Scuds is cooked. Brooks Orpik is still out, which has shuffled the defense pairings enough to put Scuderi and Bortuzzo together, which is just a train wreck. Scuderi can function when he has a strong partner in Niskanen or Letang, but he just can't be in a pairing where he is the better player. In the regular season, the Scuderi and Bortuzzo pair clicked at a 37.6 expected goals share and were outscored 9-2 at 5-on-5. How long is Scuderi signed for again? Well, at least that goal will mark the most frustrated Penguins fans will ever be with Derek Brassard. Gibbons is back, which is nice, and the Pens are far more dialed in for Game 2. They weather 3 early Ranger power plays and control the vast majority of the chances. Lundqvist can only hold out for so long.
Malkin hands it off far side, Letang to the front, score! Kunin!
Up just 1, the Penguins keep pushing. Fleury makes the routine saves he needs to while Hank is fighting for his life at the other end. Very late in the third, Jokinen finally solidifies a Penguin victory off a no-hope rebound that Lundqvist still almost gets. A shutout for Fleury and a dominant win for the Penguins. While being tied and heading to New York isn't ideal, the quality of the Game 2 win was so high that it almost nullifies the loss in Game 1. MSG, the most famous arena in the world. Have you heard about this? Mark Messier? The Guarantee? The home of Adam Graves' retired jersey? Are you familiar? In the wake of Game 2, the non-Lundqvist Rangers decide to show up. This time, it's the blue shirts that dominate play, firing shot after shot on Fleury. The Penguins are really floundering, but their goalie stands strong.
What a stop!
The Penguins finally get a quality chance early in the second, and it's Sid finally breaking through, scoring off a tremendous pass by Bortuzzo. The Rangers keep pushing back, but here comes Jokinen out of the penalty box.
The penalty box, he scores!
The Penguins go into lockdown mode, trying to bend but not break, but the Rangers get their chances. Fleury doesn't waver. Another shutout in what was one of the best playoff games of his career. The Pens are back in the driver's seat. Even when they play badly, they win. Malkin wastes little time getting his team on the board in Game 4, and the Penguins skaters have resumed playing well. After a mediocre Game 3, Lundqvist is back doing his thing, but Fleury is right there with him. Hagelin goes right by Scuderi and a flat-footed Niskanen midway through the second to tie the game on a perfect shot. The Penguins' depth speedster strikes back on the penalty kill when Brian Gibbons leaves essentially an alley-oop to Brandon Sutter. Lundqvist is pissed and finally, maybe, off his game. Jokinen seems to confirm my hypothesis in the third with a pretty bad goal on the King. The Rangers come within 1 again on a somewhat innocuous backhand by Zuccarello, but come on, am I supposed to rag on Mark because of one meh goal? The two-headed monster line strikes for the Pens late in the third, assuring a third straight win. These Rangers are a joke, dude. 2 games where they got absolutely dominated, and 1 where they got goalied by playoff Fleury. They're cooked. They even had Kreider back for Game 4. He didn't make a difference.
Gibbons diving play though to the back by Kreider and a rebound. He scores! Kreider and the Rangers get a...
Game 5 hasn't started very well. Derek Brassard lengthens the lead on a sprawling goal, but early in the second, there's Malkin galloping through the Rangers to tighten the score. He's been far and away the best Penguin in these playoffs. He's rolling. Jussi, you're facing the wrong way. McDonough blasts home a goal less than a minute later. Against Lundqvist, 3 goals down is too many to come back from. The Rangers hold on, with the series headed back to New York. Who knows what can happen? Me! The Penguins are just the better team. Fleury has been generally very strong. It would just take 1 more big performance, not just from Fleury, but from anyone, to send the Penguins to the conference final against the Canadiens. But 1 goal is about to cause a massive swing in momentum. The day before Game 5, Marty St. Louis lost his mother suddenly. The veteran rushed home and back to help the Rangers avoid elimination. Game 6 falls on Mother's Day.
And who else?
The tide has shifted. Everyone, it's time to place bets on who gets to this puck first. Rob Scuderi with a massive head start, or Carl Hagelin.
The side, and on with this comes Hagelin. He's got a man on the wing, can't get it to Richards. Now he doubles back and a backhand. He scores!
Guys, I just looked and he's signed for 3 more years after this. Before the period is over, the Penguins get a break with an extremely fluky goal from Brandon Sutter that's volleyed in by Kevin Klein. But Lundqvist is locked in. Early in the second, the Ranger goalie robs Gotch so badly that the save is made while Gotch is actively celebrating his non-goal. He does the same to Brian Gibbons minus the celebration. Late in the second, the Rangers get their lucky bounce as a puck pops over Fleury and Brassard puts it home for his 4th of the series. After that goal, the Rangers take control of play as the Penguins roll over and die, Lundqvist stopping their few quality chances.
The Penguins were so fragile, and I will never forget. Penguins goes on Mother's Day, and Marty St. Louis' mom had just passed away. Rangers won Game 6 at the Garden, like 3-0, I think. The next day, I'm back in Pittsburgh, the day before Game 7, and Penguins media relations bring Crosby and Malkin out to talk with the media at a press conference. And I remember I looked at my colleague Rob Rossi while we were sitting there, and I said, this feels like a funeral. Like, the atmosphere, like you knew they were going to lose Game 7, and they knew it.
The Pittsburgh fans are audibly nervous for Game 7. Who wouldn't be? And just 5 minutes in, the Rangers' 4th line takes the fans out of it.
He scores!
A possibly unseen part of the Rangers' odd man chance that led to this goal is Stralman, who sees the opportunity to leap into the play, and because he's there in the offensive zone, Gibbons can't just beeline to Boyle. This Stralman guy is a pretty smart player. Bilesma, given that he has what is essentially an unplayable 4th line in Adams, Glass, and Vitale, and an unplayable 3rd pairing in Scuderi and Bortuzzo, he's just putting the big guns on the ice every chance he gets. Martin and Letang on the back end, Malkin, Neal, Crosby, Kunitz, and Jokinen up front. He's rarely letting a line go out without at least one of those guys to babysit, with often Crosby and Kunitz getting shuffled around. The Malkin line is the Penguins' only hope, and early in the second, Jussi Jokinen prompts maybe the loudest eruption in the young arena's history.
Turn aside, rebound, score! Jokinen!
But a freak bounce kills them once again.
Ricochet wide, right back by St. Louis, score! Richards!
Malkin and company are giving everything they have, chance after chance stopped by Lundqvist, but they have no support. Lundqvist holds on. The Rangers have come back from down 3-1 on the road to advance to the conference final. The Penguins' fatal flaw in their complete lack of depth has been their undoing. For me, in retrospect, this might be the toughest loss to look back on. 2010, a lock, you get goalied. But it's the year after the Cup. What are you going to do? 2011, injuries, sure. 2012, goalie implosion. So bad it kind of loops around to being funny. 2013, completely outcoached, better team, and getting swept. It almost made it hurt less. But this year, with slightly better roster construction, with slightly better bounces, with slightly better coaching, this team probably goes to the Cup final. Do they beat the Kings when they get there? I don't know. Probably not. The Rangers sure didn't. But something about this loss, the way they lost, the way the front office and coaching staff failed a tandem that may be the 2 best players in the world, it's different. It's worse. Heads will roll.
The biggest thing in the Rangers series in 14, Lundqvist was great. Remember, though, the Penguins were up 3-1 in that series. And they had games 5 and 7 at home. We all thought that series was over. And the biggest thing in that series, I could tell you Lundqvist outplayed Fleury, and he did. Sidney Crosby had 1 goal in 13 games that spring. That's the worst playoff he's ever had. He had a wrist injury, and he never used that as an excuse. We know he did have surgery that summer on his wrist. He was not himself. He was not close to himself that entire postseason, and especially in the Rangers series, I thought. And the Penguins weren't as deep as they would become, that they needed their stars to come through.
Just 3 days after the Game 7 loss, Ray Shero is fired. Jason Botterill holds the GM mantle on an interim basis, but soon the Penguin higher-ups find their man. Former Carolina Hurricanes GM and Penguins goalie Jim Rutherford. Rutherford was with the Canes from the start and helped to build them from a Whalers squad that had won 1 playoff series in its 17-year existence to an eventual Stanley Cup champion. He values high talent level like he did when he traded for Rod Brind'Amour, and he's willing to trade extremely talented fan favorites when it isn't working, like he did with Justin Williams, Eric Cole, and Glenn Wesley. Frankly, the guy just really likes to trade. With Ron Francis ready to take the GM role in Carolina, Rutherford stepped down to leave him with the position in March. Things hadn't been working in Carolina, who hadn't seen a playoff berth since getting obliterated by Malkin in the 2009 conference finals. Rutherford struggled to pilot the team out of mediocrity. Never good enough to compete, but never bad enough to get any real game breakers. Since the 2009 playoff loss, the Canes drafting has been In 2009, they took Philippe Paradis, the only player in that first round to never play an NHL game, but Rutherford did use the prospect to get a few good years out of Yuri Tolusti. In 2010, Carolina chose Jeff Skinner 7th overall, who, after a terrific rookie season where he won the Calder as an 18-year-old, has been on a developmental roller coaster. 2011 was Ryan Murphy, who doesn't seem to be clicking as an NHLer. The 2012 pick was traded for Stahl, and 2013 was Elias Lindholm, who it's far too soon to tell at this point. This is all to say that Rutherford is a bold pick for GM. He is going to make big moves. He will make terrific moves. He will make bad moves. The hope is just that he strings together enough good decisions to put the Penguins over the top. One thing is for sure, Rutherford is going to take a hatchet to this roster. Bosma is the next domino to fall. Rutherford makes the decision to move on from the winningest coach in team history, and while there isn't a ton of animosity toward Disco Dan, a widely liked and generally well-regarded coach in Pittsburgh, the consensus is that it was time. He wasn't getting the results and was beginning to lose the room. When people are talking about how Crosby didn't perform on the brightest stage, something has gone horribly wrong. Assistant coaches Tony Granato and Todd Reardon are leaving too, while the more recent hire in veteran Jacques Martin will stick around in an advisory role. Rutherford also names his associate GM as the aforementioned Botterill, a cap savant, and brings in/promotes 2 new assistant GMs in Tom Fitzgerald and Bill Guerin. Despite the departures on the coaching staff, Rutherford commits to the core, Malkin, Crosby, and Letang. They aren't going to be moved. Everyone else? We'll see. Crosby wins his 2nd MVP at the NHL Awards. No surprise there. Just prior to the draft, the Penguins announced their new head coach, former coach of the Portland Winterhawks of the WHL, Mike Johnston, with his first assistant, Rick Tocchet, who will later be joined by Gary Agnew. Johnston, though a junior coach, is accustomed to coaching winners. The Winterhawks have been extremely successful under his leadership despite his 1-year suspension for recruiting violations in 2012. He's a tactics guy, an X's and O's coach, but also a vibes guy. Maybe that's what the Penguins need. On draft night, Rutherford makes a big move. James Neal is headed to Nashville in exchange for Nick Spaulding and Patrick Hornquist. James Neal is a great player. He's a 40-goal scorer. He was a first-team All-Star, but he has a bad reputation. He's often seen as reckless on the ice, taking stupid penalties. He can be lazy and arrogant off the ice. This isn't me saying Neal is a bad person. In fact, he'll be a great leader in a few years on a team that doesn't even exist yet. But the idea is out there that he is this locker room cancer, and whether that's true or not, this team needs a culture shift.
I don't know that James Neal was unpopular in the locker room. I know Crosby liked him and Malkin liked him. Now, I also had, a fourth liner on that team tell me, yeah, those guys like him because he treats them a certain way that he doesn't treat other people on the team, which, okay. The media did not like James Neal. We had our reasons. He, frankly, was very arrogant to deal with. Most people in the organization didn't like him. He was, my colleague Seth Rorabaugh at the Tribune Review once referred to James Neal as a villain from an 80s movie, which is the greatest description I could possibly produce of James Neal. That's exactly. He's Cobra Kai. Like he that's James Neal. For better, he could be entertaining to a point because he was such of a villain, but he rubbed people the wrong way. I mean, he really did. And I think when the trade was made, very simply, James Neal was a more talented hockey player than Patrick Hornqvist. Nobody would deny that.
Patrick Hornqvist is exactly that shift. The Swedish winger was Mr. Irrelevant back in the 2005 draft and has fought every step of the way to make it to the NHL. He's not the biggest or fastest player, but his sheer compete level offsets his deficiencies. He's not the talent that Neal is. He isn't likely going to score 40 goals or 80 points, but he'll give you 25 and 50 while playing every moment with the urgency of a man on fire.
Patrick Hornqvist brought a substance to the table and an energy to the table that was so different. He wasn't going to score the goals James Neal scored, at least not as many, but he was going to make the Penguins a better team and a harder team to play against in a playoff series. And he was going to bring a certain energy about him that made everyone a little better. And if you've been around Hornqvist for 5 minutes, he's not like anyone else. The guy is bouncing off the walls. The Penguins needed that net front presence on the power play so badly. It's one of the great trades in Penguins history. And, Nashville will tell you it was a good trade for them.
Spalling isn't a throw-in here either. He's a sound bottom six player with many of the same attributes as Gotch, but with a touch more offense and a bit worse defense. For a team that needs anyone with a pulse to plug into the bottom six, he's an upgrade. As far as players actually chosen in the draft, the Penguins most notably take Finnish legacy Kasperi Kapanen, son of Sammy, and the local Sam Lafferty, who, fun fact, is from my home rink. The perpetually cap-strapped Penguins are in for a beating in the free agency market. The only pending UFAs that are retained are Marcel Gotch and fringe NHLer Zach Sill. Jokinen signs with Florida, Orpik and Niskanen get buckets of cash to reunite with Todd Reirden on the Capitals. Stempniak, Vitale, Glass, Gibbons, Engelin, not all the greatest players, but all members of the NHL roster that have headed for greener pastures. To offset their losses, the Penguins do add a couple of free agents with the little money they have left. Islanders Fight Night alum Blake Como is an extremely cheap reclamation project. He scored 24 goals in 2011, but has netted just 16 in the 177 games he's played since then. Worst case scenario, he's a functional fourth liner for less than half of what the Rangers gave Tanner Glass. At $1 million, Thomas Greiss is about as typical a backup goalie as you can get, like Brent Johnson. But, Tom, please, you're German. Can you change the S's on the front of your mask from last season? The goaltender edition was due to Vokun's unfortunate retirement. The big get, giving the Penguins a significant percentage of the Germans in the NHL, is defenseman Christian Ehrhoff at $4 million for 1 year. Ehrhoff was a compliance buyout victim, meaning Buffalo, the team that bought him out, will have to pay just 2/3 of his remaining money without any cap penalty. In fact, as I write this in the summer of 2024, the Sabres are still paying Ehrhoff and will be for 4 more years. According to Craig Custance, then of ESPN, the buyout of Ehrhoff was not because of his play or even his year-by-year cap hit, but instead was due to the backdiving nature of his 10-year deal. If Ehrhoff retired early while under that contract, it would have hit the Sabres with a massive cap recapture penalty, eating up their cap space, which, given that the contract ran until Ehrhoff was 38, was a strong possibility. Just one problem for Buffalo. We know now that cap recapture was essentially the NHL's Y2K for every team except for Vancouver and Florida. Everyone except for Roberto Luongo just gets LTIR retired now. Massive cap recapture horrors, Henrik Zetterberg, Marian Hossa, Shea Weber, all guys who theoretically would obliterate their team's salary caps if they retired early, all got placed on IR, didn't officially retire, and their cap recapture was null. Only Jim Benning and Dale Talon had to suffer, as it should be. But Buffalo can't see into the future in 2014, so they dump a perfectly good defenseman for the Penguins to gather up. Ehrhoff is a great puck mover and power play quarterback, and while his counting stats were never terrific despite massive minutes in Buffalo, his underlyings were. In the second pairing Niskanen replacement role with the Pens, Ehrhoff should thrive. Lastly, depth forward Steve Downey at 1x1. Downey, when he isn't being an idiot, is a very good hockey player. He has good speed, he works hard, he can score goals, he just refuses to stop taking penalties. He's extremely reckless and takes minor penalties at an astounding rate. But the Penguins have the reputation of being soft. When the going gets rough, they go home. So they always employ some hooligan in their bottom six. And so I'll say this for Downey. He's much closer to Matt Cook than Tanner Glass. Overall, a lot of turnover, but the Penguins are getting some guys back. Dupuis is good to go. Bo Bennett should be healthy in theory. There should be a lot more time on the back end for young guys like Dupré, Pouliot, and Dumoulin. Who's going to play with Malkin, though? He lost both his line mates. Hornquist will take one of their spots, but who else? Bennett? Downey? Either way, even with Dupuis back, there's still a gaping hole in the top six. For Game 1, Johnson opts for a slightly outside-the-box solution. Hornquist and Kunitz with Crosby, while Dupuis and Sutter will slot in on Malkin's line, which isn't entirely alien territory for either player. I think this is a solid arrangement. Kunitz and Hornquist are pretty similar players, but whatever. Hornquist scores early on, and Sid adds another goal, but the best moment is goal number 3.
Here's Evgeny Malkin. Centers now. Mata left side. Score! Pascal Dupuis!
Dupuis is 35 years old. He fought back from his obliterated knee, he fought back from his clots, and as always, he's back in the lineup giving everything he has. He finishes the Penguins' 6-4 opening night win with 4 points, a goal, and 3 assists. Dupuis is right up there with Fleury when it comes to beloved teammates. The media loves him, the fans love him. He was really nice to me when I met him in a minor league baseball game. How could you not root for the guy? A real vibes victory here in Game 1. Penguins stumble a bit the rest of the way out of the gate, but then really find their stride with a stretch of 4 wins featuring 3 shutouts and an 8-3 stomping of the Devils. Hornquist is a perfect fit. He doesn't feel like a downgrade from Neal at all, regardless of the latter's more impressive skill set. Fleury is a different goaltender. He seems to have finally reached his potential, which sounds insane. But do you know how old he is? 29. He won't turn 30 until late November, which is a totally reasonable age for a goalie to reach his prime, regardless of whether he's been in the league since he was a teenager or not. After that 4th win, Mata leaves the lineup for surgery on a thyroid tumor. It was diagnosed during preseason and Ole should only be out for a couple weeks. The Pens tear through Minnesota for a 5th straight win. As they practice before their next game in Winnipeg, Dupuis feels a massive pain in his chest yet again. He lies to his teammates, saying he pulled a muscle. He tells no one what happened. He knows it's stupid, but he fears for his career. He's in the best shape of his life. He just wants to play. The Pens beat the Jets and Sabres to lengthen their winning streak to 7 games and put them at 10-2-1 on the season. It's the Rangers that stomped the Pens to snap them back to reality. But Dupuis, despite his hidden health struggles, lifts the Penguins past the Leafs to put the train right back on the tracks. According to his own Players Tribune article, there's another level of elation for Dupuis after the Leafs win. But then, the road trip ends. He goes home, and he sees his wife and kids. After the Penguins beat the Rangers in a shootout, a guilty Dupuis tells trainer Chris Stewart about his chest pain. Stewart sends him to the hospital. It was another clot in his lung. He'd played the last 5 games without a third of his lung, cut off by the clot. Frankly, he's lucky to be alive. He calls his wife in tears and says what he's been fighting for so long. Babe, I think I'm done. With Dupuis gone for the foreseeable future, the Penguins' lines are thrown into a blunder. They were already 1 top 6 forward short, now they're down 2. Hornquist and Kunitz can't play with both Crosby and Malkin. The Pens don't immolate completely, but their 11-6-4 record between Dupuis' exit and the end of the calendar year is a far cry from the 12-3-1 start to the season. Crosby and Kunitz are really missing their line mate. The random crew of bottom sixers rolling into the top 6 aren't working, apart from Blake Como, who's having a nice bounce-back season, mostly playing with Malkin. Johnston doesn't seem to have any answers, and there's the underlying fact that this roster is just thinning. This team has 1 major contributor on an entry-level contract, Olli Mata, who came back from his tumor surgery, which was diagnosed as cancerous, and immediately suffered a season-ending shoulder injury just a few weeks later. Half the team has the mumps during this stretch, which hurts. Oh, and Hornquist will be out for a month to start the new calendar year, too. Rutherford, seeing the dire situation his team is in, makes a move. The Penguins send their first-round pick and forward Rob Klinkhammer to the Oilers for David Perron. You've never mentioned Klinkhammer, you're probably saying, and that's true because the Pens traded for him less than a month ago. He played 10 games, and while he's a competent player, he isn't a needle mover. Yes, I buried the lead a bit. The exciting part of the trade is obviously Perron, a top-line scorer and serviceable 200-foot player. He's not a rental either and is under contract for 2016 at a very reasonable $3.8125 million. I don't want to jinx it, but boy does he profile a lot like James Neal when the Penguins traded for him back in 2011. Perron is already a 3-time 20-goal scorer, and yeah, he's had a tough year so far with the Oilers, but brother, who hasn't? It's the 2015 Oilers. The Penguins, despite some stretches of mediocrity and a somewhat hapless forward group, are 24-9-5 as they beat the Lightning on the night of the Perron trade. That record puts them on pace for 114 points, a mark that would definitely win them the division and would probably win them the conference, maybe even the President's Trophy. Yeah, give away a first for Perron. What's it going to be, 26th, 27th at worst? Perron will immediately fill the hole left by Hornqvist, and when the Swede gets back, the Penguins might be pretty good beyond their stars. Perron doesn't really lift this team to new heights, but he's solid, playing mostly with Kunitz and Crosby. His shooting percentage is regressing a little from the 6.8% he had with the Oilers up to closer to 10. Not quite where you would like him to be, but not awful. The Penguins are real 500, 12-8-4, between the Perron acquisition and the deadline, during which time Rutherford continues tweaking. Marcel Gotch, who hasn't been very good, was sent to St. Louis for Max Lapierre, who, while fun, has been quite bad. This year's rental ad is Daniel Winnick in exchange for hard worker Zach Sill, a second in 2016, and a fourth in 2014. That's, lot to give up for a forward whose career high in goals is 11 and career high in points is 30. Winnick is a good defender, though, and he's big. He immediately becomes the Penguins' best bottom six guy not named Sutter. Did you know Craig Adams is still here? That's crazy. There's also a need on the blue line. Ehrhoff has been strong when healthy, but has been struggling with injuries. He came back for one game in February, but he's out again. With him and Mata both missing, the Penguins' defense is gruesome after Martin and Letang. The only other veteran D-man they have is Scuderi, and he has not had a miraculous turnaround. He's gone from being okay with a strong partner to borderline unplayable. He's old, he can't move, that's life. First, out goes Robert Bortuzzo and a seventh for St. Louis's Ian Cole, trading some snarl for an overall better player. Cole never really reached the level the Blues had wished for when they picked him 18th overall in 2007. He's no offensive juggernaut, but he's very steady. Then the Penguins sent Simone Dupre, once the top prospect in the Penguin system, to Anaheim for... Are you kidding me? Okay, I'll be fair. Simone, while his underlyings have been good, hasn't seemed to figure it out at the NHL level. He's 23. He probably is what he is. A big guy, a strong puck mover, but he's not able to translate his talent into real tangible results. Ben Lovejoy did absolutely nothing for me during his first stint with the Pens, but he's gotten much better. He's not a 6-7 anymore, he's been a 4-5 on a very good Ducks team. While the knee-jerk reaction is to think of who Dupre and Lovejoy were 3 years ago, the reality is the Penguins get a strong defensive defenseman for a guy who may not be anything and was increasingly looking superfluous with Mata, Pouliot, Dumoulin, and Scott Harrington approaching or even surpassing him. This is a pretty good team. The fourth line is scary, the bottom pair isn't good, Greiss has been pretty bad, but the top guys are just so good. Fleury, Letang, Crosby, Malkin. These four have been so good that they've overcome poor depth so far. Now that the depth is a touch better, the team should, at the very least, be able to sustain their point pace around the 110s. Now I will show you a graph from our friends at MoneyPuck. Here is the Penguins' goals scored above expected through March 14th. Essentially, their finishing luck/talent. You see it's stuck right above expected all season. Makes sense for a good team with high offensive talent. Here's the last month of the season.
Damn it! Oh my God!
What happened? From the trade deadline to the end of the season, Chris Kunitz evaporated. 1 goal and 1 assist in 20 games. Is he just getting old? Ehrhoff came back and got hurt again. Has he played his last game as a Penguin? Chris Letang was concussed late in March. He's likely done for the year. Will injuries like this tarnish what has been a sparkling career? Blake Como is ice cold. Ben Lovejoy is now up on the top pair. Perron seems a lot more like 2011 James Neal than 2012. Do you think you're going to win many games with Daniel Winnick on your top line? Malkin, Crosby, and Fleury are playing well, but there comes a point even their play can't bail the team out. The Pens careen toward the finish line. They go 7-10-3 in their last 20. They can't score, and Johnston, unlike Bylsma, can't make something out of nothing. Bylsma's best coaching came when the team was beaten to a pulp and had their backs against the wall. Johnston can't seem to get anything out of his depth. He's in panic mode, throwing random lines together. 115 line combinations and defense pairs will play at least 10 minutes together at 5-on-5 in the 2015 season. It's the most in team history dating back to the start of the advanced statistics era in 2008, and, as of writing, the mark is still the most lines in team history. Most of the lines don't stay together long enough to even show what they can do. It's a mess. The team that was projected to win their division for a large portion of the season finishes with 98 points. Had the Bruins not lost 3 in a row to close out the season, and the Pens not nabbed 2 points in the season finale against the trying-to-lose Sabres, Boston would have run Pittsburgh down for the final playoff spot. The second wild card is embarrassing and unacceptable. But they're in the playoffs. All you have to do is get in. They have winners on this team. Scuderi even won a cup as an 8 seed back in LA. But this isn't the molten hot 2012 Kings. This is a team in complete disarray, as cold as they've been since Bush was president, stumbling toward a buzzsaw. They will play the New York Rangers in round 1. Remember last year's Rangers that were good but not unbeatable that marched all the way to the Stanley Cup final? This is essentially the same team, just better. The major losses were Brad Richards, Anton Strawman, Benoit Pouliot, and Brian Boyle, who have each been replaced or even improved upon by Kevin Hayes, Dan Boyle, JT Miller, and Jesper Fast, respectively. Rick Nash has hit his stride this year and scored 42 goals. They got the big deadline prize again this season, adding all-offense defenseman Keith Yandel, who will be on the third pair of this preposterous defense corps. Oh, and Lundqvist is still Lundqvist. The Penguins just got in, but now they have to play a Rangers team that won the President's Trophy, finished third in goals for, and third in goals against. The Pens are a team that can't finish, going up against the best goalie in the world, the stoppable force versus the immovable object. Good luck. For Game 1, the Penguins, with their defense slaughtered, have gone with Lovejoy Martin, Cole Scuderi, and a third pairing of Brian Dumoulin and 27-year-old Taylor Chorney, who just made it up to the NHL for the first time since January of 2012, and who I frequently think is Brooks Orpik because he's a lefty wearing 44. Brassard doesn't waste any time. McDonough strikes on the power play. Do the Penguins have a prayer? Blake Como tightens the game with a classic Paul Staggerwald call.
Lundqvist to save. Score on the rebound! The Penguins get a goal from Max Lapierre, I believe.
How did you think that was Lapierre? Whatever. The Pens skaters just get their lunch eaten by the Rangers, but Fleury, like last year, is playing out of his mind. The Pens don't have an offensive defenseman anywhere in the lineup. They don't have any real transition drivers back there without Letang. They're toast. 2-1 is the final score as the Penguins squander a 36-save performance from Fleury. All Rangers in the first period of Game 2 as if that's a surprise. Derek Stepan, Brandon Sutter, now it's your time.
Sutter with an opening up the wing, hit the post with the shot!
The Penguins are so close. They have a pulse in the second, and finally Sutter time comes for real. Hornqvist's tenacity gives the Penguins the lead before a signature Crosby goal makes the game 3-1. The Penguins defend and Fleury with all they have in the third, but the Rangers are circling. Brassard.
To the back again, Yandel, fed across, another shot, they score!
The Rangers' woe song feels like a funeral dirge.
Even though the Rangers had nothing on the power plays that they had moved it around like...
But the Pens keep fighting. They get off their heels, and Kunitz nets a massive insurance goal. Nash scores in the waning seconds, but it's too late. The Penguins have tied the series. The Penguins' defense is a skeleton crew, but they're giving everything they have. But in Game 3, Hagelin is too fast.
In the face in Game 1. Look out. Hagelin to the goal.
A bad bounce off the end boards makes the game 2-0 midway through the second. Lundqvist wasn't very good in games 1 and 2. That's done with. The Penguins play well, but Hank is too good until finally Hornqvist gets a lucky bounce. With 13 seconds left, Johnston draws up his play on the whiteboard.
And on the ice for the Pittsburgh Penguins, and Malkin has the puck. Crosby won the draw. The Paul Martin shot, and it's deflected over to the near wall. 6 seconds to go.
The play wasn't seriously a shot from the point into Hagelin's shins, was it? Bob Airy describes Game 4 the best.
And really, pretty much a must-win game for the Pittsburgh Penguins.
And finally,
he finds Lovejoy. The shot. Score! Penguins score first!
that Dumoulin kid is pretty good. Not sure why he's still playing the least of all the defensemen. Any guesses who ties the game for the Rangers?
Nash throws it in front. McDonough there. Fleury kept it out somehow. Now they score. The Rangers have scored, and I think Brassard, of course, is the last guy to get a stick on it for New York.
Brassard is a beast, man. I'd love for that guy to be a Penguin someday. The goalies play incredible hockey for the remainder of regulation, matching each other save for save. But overtime doesn't last long.
St. Louis trying to step out, throws it in front. Fleury trying to stop it, and Lapierre down, and the Rangers score.
Man, that was a bad bounce. I wish somebody would have stopped Hayes, but man, that was a bad bounce. With their back against the wall, now would be a great time for the Pens to give up a goal immediately.
Hoping to prevent the Rangers from getting the first goal, and the shot by Boyle. They scored the rebound.
Great! What more can you ask of Fleury? He's been spectacular. He's given the Pens a fighting chance. Finally, late in the second, Nick Spaulding ties it. Nick! I honestly kind of forgot you were here. Thanks mostly to Fleury, the Penguins have ambled into overtime once again. Root Sports throws the Pirates score bug up in the top right corner in case Joe from Monroeville was starting to get pissed that he couldn't watch the Buccos. Then, an image was burned into my mind.
Crosby there. The Rangers have the puck. Look out.
I'm going to make a confession. I really like this Rangers team, too. I stated it earlier that I liked the Rangers growing up. In fact, through most of my childhood, I claimed them to be my favorite team, even if that was mostly for show. Alec Martinez scoring in Game 5 of 2014 didn't hit me nearly as hard as Game 5 of the 2008 Cup Final. While I claimed I was always cheering for both teams, it always stung a little more when the Penguins lost. I felt it in 2014, and I felt it here in 2015.
Hagelin with a shot. They score. Rangers win the series. Carl Hagelin wins it.
I really think this Hagelin goal was the beginning of the end for my time as a true Ranger fan. Yeah, I would still follow the team secondarily, but not with the fervor I had or told myself I had when I was a tween. Maybe it was just my frontal cortex developing. I was 16 when Hagelin turned to shoot toward the Penguins' net, but I really think it was just my family. My dad, soft-spoken, a good sport, but a lifelong Pittsburgh sports loyalist dating back to the Steel Curtain and We Are Family Pirates, would always try his best to feign some level of interest or of happiness when the Rangers would win, even against the Penguins. Hockey and sports in general for me are more about the camaraderie that come with them, namely with my dad, but sometimes with my mom too, who, despite not being as into the sport, was still yelling at Fleury to get back in the net anytime he went on one of his play-the-puck journeys. Or my uncle and aunt, who lived in Pittsburgh and would take us all to games, and were at my own hockey games nearly as often as my parents. These were all Penguin fans. They were the reason I was a Penguin fan. As I looked over at my dad, who, thanks to his realism about the Penguins, wasn't too disappointed by the loss, I looked at my hockey fandom rationally for the first time. I know it sounds convenient based on what's to come. Maybe it sounds like I'm just trying to justify flip-flopping. But why was I a Rangers fan at all? Because I had a Wayne Gretzky toy when I was 3? Why am I a Penguins fan? Because I was born here? I have gone to games since I was a kid. I've watched every game I could. I have an ungodly large collection of jerseys featuring friggin' Mark Letestu, and everyone around me is one. Which one seems like more sound reasoning to you? Which team do I sound like a bigger fan of? Well, here we are. The Penguins are dead in the water. Rutherford is going to do something. Prior to the draft, Pittsburgh radio personality Mark Madden pens a special for Beaver County Times titled, "If the Penguins Want to Change, Malkin's Got to Go." He admits it won't happen, but he accuses fans of being too sentimental about their favorite players at the cost of success. He shoots barbs at Malkin, labeling him as stubborn and sullen before proposing his trade. Malkin to the Blues for David Backes and TJ Oshie, plus theoretical picks or prospects. This isn't just Dave from Katanning. This is the most recognizable sports media figure in the city, declaring to his many fans that it's time to ship out Malkin. That's the level of frustration present in Pittsburgh, especially among the casual, mostly Steeler fans demographic. But then at the draft, nothing comes. The Penguins drafted Sprong in the second round. He has some flash. After the draft, the rumbles of a Pittsburgh move build, coinciding with the Toronto Maple Leafs advertising the sale of their star winger. On day one of free agency, GM JR pulls the trigger. Sergei Palatnikov signs with the Penguins, a KHL import and a big, strong player. He's only 25, and the consensus is that he should slot in perfectly on Malkin's line. Oh, look, there's a trade coming across the wire. To Toronto goes Nick Spalling, top prospect in the Penguins system, Kasperi Kapanen, highly touted defense prospect Scott Harrington, a first-round pick, and a third-round pick, a king's ransom. In return, Toronto sends a second-round pick, farmhands Tim Erickson and Tyler Biggs, and Phil Kessel. Kessel is not the most popular man in Toronto. He's seen as lazy, out of shape, and unable to lead the team to anything significant. It doesn't help that to get Phil from the Bruins in the first place, Toronto gave up picks that became Tyler Seguin and Dougie Hamilton. The comments underneath Sportsnet's article breaking the news are scathing. Addition by subtraction. I thought he was immovable. Got rid of dead weight. What the hell are the Pens thinking? Writes Walter_White. They now have 42% of their cap space tied up in 3 players for the next 6 years. Sid can't do it all by himself. It's the beginning of the end for this franchise. Player 87 responds, "It's that remarkable, outstanding, amazing GM Jim Rutherford. Yes, the same Rutherford who left Carolina in shambles. I can't believe the Pens hired him at all." The opinion toward the deal in Pittsburgh is far more positive. Kessel is a name brand star. Yeah, maybe he's lazy, so what? He's going to play with a player a lot better than Tyler Bozak, and he's going to score goals. That's what the Penguins need. July 1st isn't all good news. Downey, Como, Winnick, and Lapierre depart. I'd have liked to have kept Como, but the forward depth sucked last year with those guys on more team-friendly deals, so it isn't going to be much of a hit aside from the Penguins needing to find more bodies to fill their roles. Thomas Greiss signs with the Isles. He wasn't great, and Zakov was pretty good in Wilkes. There's also 21-year-old Matt Murray, who just won Goalie of the Year in the AHL. Maybe not ready yet, but he will be soon. Soon enough to not bother bringing in a whatever backup for over $1 million. Ehrhoff departs. Would have been great if he was ever healthy, and Chorney is out too. But the biggest loss is another defenseman. Paul Martin signs with the San Jose Sharks for more money than the Penguins could have given him. He was carrying the defense in the Rangers series. He's a beast. He's earned his money. So long, Paul. The Pens are going to add on the blue line, right? In classic capstrap Penguin fashion, Pittsburgh sifts through the bargain bin, ending up with defensive, 15-ish goal forward Eric Fehr and the somehow still pretty fast Matt Cullen. Fehr is a lot like Winnick, but probably a touch better and a touch cheaper. That's nice. Cullen is a significant upgrade on Spalling or Lapierre or Gotch before him. He's about to turn 39, but he still has some juice. Rutherford wasn't done dealing. Brandon Sutter, who had been solid, albeit unremarkable outside of some timely goals in Pittsburgh, was sent to Vancouver with a third for a second Adam Clendening and center Nick Bonino. Bonino is a lateral move from Sutter at worst and may even be slightly better. The second and Clendening, a soon-to-be 23-year-old defenseman and a former second-round pick, were basically free. Jim Benning, what a GM. The Pens do make a move on the blue line. They bring in Sergei Gonchar on a PTO. I know he's Gino's friend, but he's 41 years old. He's cooked. The PTO doesn't work out for Gonch, but he does end up signing on as a development coach. So just checking back on the D, it's Mata and Letang, good, Dumoulin and Lovejoy, who knows, and Cole and Scuderi. Well, you know what? It's a big role increase for Mata, and Scuderi is a stiff. But it's not that bad of a group if I squint and hope for the best. The forwards are in a pretty good place. Kessel gives a massive facelift to the top 6. He'll mostly slot in alongside Malkin and Perron, while Crosby takes the Hornquist-Kunitz pairing. That's good. I like that. The bottom 6 looks better than last year. Bonino and Cullen are good. Plotnikov and Bennett have some upside. Bobby Farnham is the obligatory cardio merchant. And somehow, 18-year-old Daniel Sprong has made the opening night roster on a trial basis. The Penguins lose 3 in a row to start the season, but things start to turn around with the call-up of Brian Rust to shore up the depth. And somehow, someway, Pascal Dupuis is back. Dupuis brings so much depth to the lineup. Yes, he's 36. Yes, he's not quite at the level he was when he got his 5th place Hart vote in 2013. But it's vibes, man. He works harder than anyone else, and that rubs off on his teammates. Slotting Duper back into the top 6 is great because Perron has had just a rancid start to the season. He wasn't bad last year, though he wasn't at his typical level, but this year, he just has not fit. Hopefully it's just a cold spell. After a 9-1 stretch, the Penguins sit at 9-4 in early November. Then the wheels fall off. 4-4-2 in their next 10 is discouraging, with losses to bad teams like the Flames, Devils, Blue Jackets, and Oilers. A massive 5-1 win against the Sharks on December 1st makes it seem like the Pens are on the right track, but back-to-back losses to LA and Anaheim snuff out the glimmer of hope. The game against Anaheim is the final one of Dupuis' career. His clotting condition can't be avoided. This time, he's done for good. The Penguins win against Colorado, but they lose Chris Letang to injury. It should be pointed out now that the Penguins aren't horrible. They're on pace for 96 or 97 points. That probably gets them into the playoffs. It also probably gets them beaten to a pulp by the Capitals in the first round. A quick look down to Wilkes-Barre, and you can see that there are NHL players just waiting for the call-up. Tom Kuhnhackl, Brian Rust is back out of the lineup for some reason, Connor Sherry, and most impressive of all is Scott Wilson, who is scoring more than half a goal per game. Instead, Johnston is just sticking with his guys. Gotta play Palatnikov, sure, he hasn't scored an NHL goal yet, he has 2 assists and can't be trusted to play more than 9 minutes a night, but you can't scratch him. Like, what is Sprong still doing here? He has 2 goals. You and JR burnt a year of his ELC for what? To play him on the 4th line for 6 minutes a night? Does this kid seem like a defensive presence to you? He's 18. After a shootout loss to the Kings, Rutherford makes the call. Mike Johnston and Gary Agnew are out. In comes Baby Pens head coach Mike Sullivan. Johnston didn't have it. There was an obvious disconnect between him and his players, and he wasn't getting the most out of any of them, particularly the 2 should-be star wingers in Perron and Kessel.
You have to have a certain personality to coach Crosby, Malkin, Letang. Not saying they're bad guys, that they're not. They're good guys. Really good. But great players have egos. And great players like to play the game a certain way. I just never had the sense they had any respect for him. I don't know. I think initially he just came on the scene and they just didn't think he was a very good coach. And they didn't think he was an NHL coach. And I think he used certain tactics that he would use on 17-year-old kids. It wasn't going to work with 25-year-old millionaires. And I think that happened a lot. Like, he had them doing yoga at practices and stuff. And like they just like they didn't really buy in. Like Mike, and listen, I don't ever want to be critical of Mike Johnson. Really nice guy. Like, everybody liked him. Really good human being, honest to God. But it was so obvious from the beginning that he wasn't the right guy. And, we all kind of knew it. And I think Jim Rutherford wanted to give him a second year to, see if things would get better. But we knew from the beginning. After his second season, which was the 15-16 year, I can't tell you who said it, but after the very first game, it was Phil Kessel's first game in Pittsburgh, the Penguins lose 3-0. And a very high-ranking person in the organization came up to me after the game and said, "It's just not going to work with this coach." I said, "It's been 1 game." And he said, "Yeah, I know." Like, okay. And so everybody knew it.
Sullivan, while affable, is a much stronger motivator, consistent with being a longtime 4th liner in the NHL. He was last an NHL coach a decade ago with the Bruins, just for 2 years, 1 good and 1 bad. But he didn't trade Joe Thornton, so it's not entirely his fault. He's been mostly an assistant since then, making a variety of stops before becoming the head coach in Wilkes in the summer of 2015. Looking back on it, it was likely a bit of a backdoor head coaching hire. Rutherford clearly was dissatisfied with Johnston, so he got his guy and stashed him in the minors.
I think Jim Rutherford had to know at that time that the Mike Johnston experiment might not work. And, people forget this now as it's been 20 years, but when Mike Sullivan was hired in Boston, like 2003 or whatever it was, like, he was considered like a big time hot shot coach. Like, everybody thought he was really good. His first year in Boston went really well. And then, as I recall, there was the lockout, and then things really didn't go well his next season, and they fired him really quickly, as we often see in the NHL. And he just kind of was like forgotten around the league for a while, and he worked his way back to the top, and I think at that time, Jim Rutherford knew very well that this was a gifted hockey coach and a guy that he really liked. And I think Jim knew damn well who Mike Johnson's replacement would be if the time came to fire him. I'm sure he was hoping that he wouldn't have to, and it was just, a really good coach in Wilkes-Barre, and there's nothing wrong with that. But yeah, I think Jim was planning for that for sure.
Sullivan's coaching style is about speed, tenacious forechecking, and counterattacking. Is this Penguins roster really built for that? Not currently, but JR is on the job. He's about to pull off the heist of the century. Right before the Penguins game against the Capitals on December 14th, Rutherford calls up Chicago to make a trade. The Penguins send Rob Scuderi, with some salary retention, to Chicago for Trevor Daley.
Grabs it and rims it out to a point that's wide open. And the Stars score.
Daley shot it. Yager was on his way to the bench after he left it.
I've been pretty clear about my feelings concerning Scuderi's second run in Western PA. It's not his fault, but he's old and can't move. Somehow, in return, the Penguins received a defenseman that is 5 years younger, makes about the same money, and is coming off a season where he scored 16 goals in 68 games. I assume Rutherford had to tell Guerin and Botterill to quit laughing so he could put the call into the league. Yes, Daley has been in the doghouse with Joel Quenneville. He's getting single-digit minutes, and yes, he isn't spectacular defensively, but man can he skate. Daley has tremendous puck-moving abilities and a great shot. His analytic profiles aren't always the most flattering, but his transition game doesn't show up on the charts. He's a very good second-pairing defenseman. Thanks, Stan. You're definitely a great GM that should be in charge of the best player in the world's team. Sullivan's first 15 games, coinciding with Daley's first 14, the bottom line does not improve. 5, 6, and 4, and the team has sunk to dangerous territory. They're on pace for just 90 points, a mark that probably won't even get them into the playoffs. Kessel is on pace to finish with under 50 points, an unacceptable mark for a player that cost so much to obtain. Johnston had mostly played Kessel with David Perron and Evgeny Malkin, none of whom are prodigious forecheckers. They are most valuable as perimeter players. Perron is snake-bit beyond comprehension, and while Malkin has continued to produce, Perron struggles way down Kessel. While Kunitz-Malkin-Kessel has worked well, Kunitz is Sid's guy, and Crosby and Kessel has not been an especially effective pairing. But Sullivan and Rutherford are making changes. Sullivan is playing the young guys. Matt Murray got some spot starts in December due to a Fleury injury and looked tremendous. Sherry, Wilson, Rust, and Kuhnhackl have all carved out some minutes. All four skaters have been reliable beyond their years. Bo Bennett is hurt, Sprong is back in juniors, and Palatnikov has been sent to press box jail, never to return. The most major upgrade these young players bring? Speed. Rust and Sherry, while smaller guys, can motor, and Kuhnhackl and Wilson aren't slow by any means, but they've got nothing on Rutherford's next big acquisition. David Perron and depth defenseman Adam Clendening are sent to Anaheim for Carl Hagelin. Perron, while a good player, was not working in Pittsburgh, and Clendening is a quad A D-man. Hagelin isn't having a great season either, but he's a fierce forechecker and maybe the fastest straight-line player in the league. His compete level is astronomical, which makes him fast friends with fellow Swede and maniacal competitor Patrick Hornqvist. While their record is cratered, it's almost as if the Penguins have undergone a rebuild over the last month. They shed their dead weight and became significantly faster and significantly more bought in. The pieces are there. Then it finally clicks. The Penguins go 7-2 in their next 9 games, putting them right back on pace to be a bottom-half playoff team. The young guys are also pitching in more offensively, which is a big help in what was a pointless bottom 6 just 2 months ago. Crosby, Malkin, Letang, and Fleury perform as stars should, and finally, so does Kessel. Where Perron couldn't mesh with Phil, Hagelin's tenacity and speed fit perfectly. Hagelin himself is scoring at the highest rate of his career, whether with Malkin or Nick Bonino as his center. The Penguins stabilize heading up to the trade deadline. They already made their big moves, so they aren't slated to be massive buyers. They opt to buy low, sending a third to Edmonton for defenseman Justin Schultz with 50% retained. Schultz is an electrifying offensive defenseman when he's on his game. He has a great shot, he's a strong skater, and a good passer. What he can't do is defend. He is heinous in his own zone. I've watched a ton of footage on Schultz's Oilers days. He is lost. The tremendous offensive IQ he has goes subterranean in his own zone. He was in a way too big a role in Edmonton. He's not in all situations number one, but the tools to be an effective NHL defenseman are certainly there. He's young, thanks to the retention he's cheap, and in Pittsburgh he'll play much more sheltered minutes. Maybe Sergei Gonchar can get something out of him. If not, whatever, it's a third. The Schultz acquisition gives the Penguins some much-needed insurance on the back end, as they now have 7 bona fide NHL defensemen, as trust in Derek Pouliot hasn't quite developed. Letang, Mata, Daly, Schultz, Lovejoy, Cole, and a man who we need to shed the spotlight on, Brian Dumoulin. Dumoulin, while playing limited but not sheltered minutes, has been spectacular. He's extremely consistent. He doesn't make many mistakes. He can push transition when he needs to. He's a big guy, so he doesn't get bullied. He is a tremendous hockey player in a thankless role. Oh, and he's 24 years old. Close enough. Welcome back, Paul Martin. This is all to say that Brian Dumoulin rocks. On actual deadline day, the Pens make some minor tweaks. Sergei Plotnikov is given to Arizona, while another move brings back longtime farmhand Dustin Jeffrey to aid a depleted Baby Pens roster. There isn't a massive arms race where the Penguins fall behind. The only big name that moves is Eric Staal to the Rangers, but he's in the midst of his worst season since the 2005 lockout. Am I supposed to care about J.M. Lyles to the Bruins or Daniel Winnick to the Caps? I don't. Like I said, the Pens have already had a lot of turnover this year, but now that their group is rocking, there's no reason to mess with it. After the deadline, the Penguins alternate wins and losses, but Murray has joined the team full-time as Fleury's backup, which is another boost. No shade to Zakov. Statistically, it might be best for the Pens to fall back into the first wildcard spot to get out of the Metropolitan Division and play whoever wins a pretty weak Atlantic. The Capitals, Rangers, and Islanders are all formidable opponents, likely better teams than the Panthers. Regardless, the Pens will now get a tour of their division with games against each team in sequence. They win 6 straight. Jackets, Rangers, Islanders, Hurricanes, Flyers, Capitals. 4 of those teams are headed to the playoffs. None of them beat the Penguins. They get Lundqvist to throw a little fit. They did it all, having lost Malkin 8 minutes into the Blue Jackets game. Hopefully he won't miss much playoff time. Yes, it's not perfect. They do lose to the Devils, getting goalied by Scott Wedgwood, falling short of the division sweep, but still, they're on fire. They've lost Wilson for the season, which is a bummer given the promise he's shown, but Bo Bennett is back and playing pretty well, and young Oscar Sundqvist has shown some promise as a fourth liner. Schultz has been a strong player in his limited minutes. As expected, his play has improved in a more sheltered role. After that loss to the Devils, the Pens win another 4 games, including another against the Rangers, but disaster strikes. Fleury is concussed in a win against Nashville. He's not been as good as he was last year behind a much worse team and system, but he's still been solid, and his recent playoff performance combined with this dominating possession team would have been terrific. He'll be out for the rest of the season and at least the first round of the playoffs. The Penguins don't miss a beat. Murray slams the door on the Islanders as the Penguins throttle them 5-0. Murray backstops the Pens to wins in games 79, 80, and 81. Just 1 game left until the playoffs. Crosby has notched 66 points in 52 games since Sullivan's hiring. Letang is even more of a stark improvement with a baffling for the era 53 points in just 46 games. They are 1st and 5th in the league in that statistic since December 12th. Thanks to their late run of dominance, the Pens are locked in as the 2nd seed in the Metro, behind only the 120-point Capitals. They rest Sid and Letang for Game 82. Should be a pretty whatever game. No. Zakov comes in relief. He plays well enough, but the Penguins drop the game. The result doesn't matter. How long will Murray be out? Okay, it seems short term, but he'll probably miss time in the first round. Fleury still isn't particularly close to coming back. The Penguins will have to turn to Zatkoff to start the playoffs. Just a couple of losses could be enough to derail the season just when they had everything coming together. Who are they playing? Oh, you guys again? Do I have to go over them again? Okay, speed run. Lundqvist, backup is now Antti Ranta. He's good, but not as good as Talbot. D, same guys as last year, except now they have youngster Brady Shea filling in for the injured Ryan McDonough. Forward, St. Louis retired. Hagelin is obviously a Penguin, and there were some depth switches. They got the big fish at the deadline once again in Eric Stahl, but he's been a dud with just 3 goals and 3 assists across 20 games in blue. They aren't as deep up front as they were in years past. The Rangers are still good, but Hank is getting older. The D is getting older, and the forward group is getting thinner. Their window isn't closed, but there's certainly someone complaining about the breeze. The Penguins go 7D in Game 1. Mata is back from an injury, while Malkin, Rust, and shockingly Bo Bennett are still out. The Penguins will ride their top 2 lines, Crosby with Kunitz and Hornqvist, and Hagelin, Bonino, and Kessel. Fair, Cullen, Kuhnhackl will eat some ice time, and Sid will double shift with Sundqvist and Sherry. To get the fans engaged, or maybe just for good luck, the Penguins will don their alternates in all home games. Throwbacks to the 1991 and 92 Cup seasons. Despite the aesthetics, despite the lines, despite the Penguins' roaring end of the season, Game 1 is between the Hall of Fame-bound Henrik Lundqvist and a man the Penguins have demoted to being their third-string goalie twice in the last 2 years. Just 4 minutes in, the Rangers have a chance to take the Pittsburgh crowd out of the game.
Mark Stahl, Kevin Hayes, what a save by Zatkoff!
The first is highlighted by the goaltenders at both ends until the final minute. Sherry, who thanks to the 7 defenseman lineup has slid to play with Hornqvist and Crosby, set up the Swede to score and run over his countrymen in the Ranger goal. Sherry will rarely hit the ice without Crosby from here out. Lundqvist was hurt in that collision, a scratch on his eye, so in comes Antti Ranta, who is very good. He's done a great job as the Rangers' backup, but he's not Hank. Ranta plays well, and the Rangers get their chances, but Zatkoff stands tall. In the waning moments of the second, Dan Girardi shoots a puck into Patrick Hornqvist's shins.
Hornqvist, he has Crosby. Here he is. One-on-one with Ranta. He scores!
Brian Boucher points it out, but the Penguins' counterattack, which defined their turnaround this season, is devastating the Rangers' generally slow defense, especially the Girardi-Stahl pairing. The Rangers desperately need something to bring their squad back to life after 2 crushing late-period goals. They get just that when Carl Hagelin and Ian Cole, the Penguins' 2 best penalty killers, find themselves in the box simultaneously. Derek Stepan cuts into the lead as Kuhnhackl can only hold him off for so long. Cole is out, but Carl Hagelin will remain in the box for nearly another 3 minutes thanks to his double minor for high sticking. This is the Rangers' chance, their window of opportunity. Tom Kuhnhackl slams it shut.
Kuhnhackl scores!
When Eric Stahl runs into Zatkoff, Patrick Hornqvist makes it 4-1 on the power play. Stepan responds, but it's too late. Hornqvist completes his hat trick into an empty net. The Rangers have fallen victim to Mr. Game 1, Jeff Zatkoff. Malkin and Rust are back for Game 2, so Sundqvist and Schultz are out. Lundqvist is back for the Rangers. Malkin will take Sherry and Rust on his line to start, though he'll soon swap Sherry for Kunitz. Gino doesn't miss a beat. The 2 teams remain scoreless through the first, but early in the second, the Pens are the Harlem Globetrotters.
Feeds it across Daly.
The jubilation in Pittsburgh is broken up by 3 quick Ranger goals. Kreider scores early in the third to put the game away, Phil Kessel's late goal notwithstanding. It's a reminder that this Rangers team is good, and Zatkoff isn't going to carry this team on his back. The Penguins outchanced the Rangers massively in Game 2. They just have to keep that up, because Matt Murray is back. There's good news for the Rangers, too, as Ryan McDonough draws into the lineup for the first time. It once again takes until the second for the first goal to be scored, but this time the Rangers strike first. Rick Nash shorthanded, high glove side. But the Penguins are owning this game. They're so much faster than the Rangers. They possess the puck better. They get higher quality chances. Finally, the Pens break through. A picture-perfect pass from Kessel onto Crosby's stick.
Phil Kessel, physically speaking, is probably a better pure passer of the puck than Sidney Crosby or Evgeny Malkin. Think about that. I'm not knocking those two. He could make passes on the power play, like high-risk passes that you really wouldn't even tell a guy to try, and he would pull it off a lot. Like, he became the facilitator on the power play, which is interesting because when I had thought of Phil Kessel in Boston and Toronto, I would always see him walking off the left wing wall and firing wrist shots, which he could still do. And he did do that just enough to keep defenses honest. But to me, it was his ability to pass the puck on the power play and to run the whole show on the power play. And also Crosby and Malkin being willing to let him run the show. In all the years they've been in Pittsburgh together, almost 2 decades, only 2 guys were allowed to run the show that weren't Crosby or Malkin. That was Gonchar and Kessel.
Lundqvist is playing like a madman. It takes a gaffe from the Rangers defense to get one past him. That and a great play by Matt Cullen. Rick Nash lays some good hits, but the Rangers have nothing. The Penguins have reached critical mass. Get out of the way. Letang ices the game. The Rangers are done. Their only hope was the goalie disparity. Now with Murray in net, the Rangers have to hope for some other shoe to drop. Maybe Murray will implode, but that doesn't seem likely. The Penguins don't hesitate to bludgeon the Rangers in Game 4. Lovejoy fires a shot and Fair hurtles toward the net like a cannonball. 1-0 Penguins. Minutes later, Sid tips a shot past Lundqvist. Hank, do you really think that was a high stick? Do you, man? Late in the period, Connor Sherry makes it 3-0 on a great individual play. This kid is playing out of his mind. He's tiny. Crosby towers over him. But the undrafted free agent out of UMass plays every shift with the compete level exemplified to him by so many of the veteran leaders on this team. He's got terrific speed and small game skill that is rarely seen in players with his lack of draft pedigree. He's good. Not just good for a call-up or a rookie. He's a good player. It looked like Malkin scored to make it 4-0, but it comes back. Kunitz ran over Lundqvist, who is nearing a meltdown. Gino gets his goal early in the second.
Malkin will fire, scores! Another power play goal! And Pittsburgh leads by 4.
The Penguins outplay the Rangers, but the Blue Shirts have their chances. Murray gives them nothing. Hank is replaced by Ranta during the first TV timeout. He's struggling, and there are obvious concerns about his eye injury affecting his play. Malkin takes a 2-hand slash from JT Miller early in the third. The shades of Adam Graves from 92 are disregarded as Malkin scores on his next shift. The series is 3-1 Penguins heading back to Pittsburgh, but we've seen this story before. Just 2 years ago, the Penguins lost twice at home to these Rangers to blow a 3-1 series lead. They have to close it out here. They have to slam the door. A tip from Rick Nash just over a minute in makes that a much harder task. This is where the Penguins collapse. This is where it all starts to come unglued. When the going gets tough, they go home. The Rangers continue to control the game, but Phil Kessel's passing once again results in a Penguin goal. Immediately, the Penguins' momentum is killed thanks to a weird bounce off Dominic Moore and Patrick Hornqvist. Brady Shea, who is playing in just his 12th NHL game and has been extremely impressive throughout this series, takes a stupid penalty seconds after the Rangers' goal. The Penguins' zone entry demon Phil Kessel evens the score. Twice now, back-breaking goals have been scored against the Penguins. Twice now, they haven't flinched. You may have noticed how many of the Penguins' goals are coming on the power play, when in past years their special teams turned into a pumpkin in the playoffs. Yes, that's Kessel and Hornqvist impacting it, but special teams are the point of the game most impacted by coaching, and where Dan Bylsma was outcoached repeatedly, Mike Sullivan, Rick Tocchet, and Jacques Martin are coaching circles around Alain Vigneault and company. The rest of the first goes by without a goal, but in the second, the Pens' fourth line gets to work.
And now Daly in front, they score, it's Rust!
Then they do it again.
By Rust, Cullen picks up the puck and scores!
Every single guy on the ice for both goals is in their first full season with the Pens. Dumoulin, Rust, Kuhnhackl, and even Matt Murray are all rookies. Cullen was a free agent. Daly was a midseason trade. Frankly, I don't think a unit of Chorney, Scuderi, Lapierre, Winnick, and Craig Adams puts that goal in. The Pens are in Ship of Theseus territory with their roster, and truthfully, it's not the same team anymore. Go ahead, Connor, you're new too. I mean, Rust has been pretty good too. Maybe he can be Malkin's Sherry.
Pass across to Rust. He scores!
Well, that answers that. The building is rocking. The demon that the Rangers have been for the Penguins is nearly slain. One more period. Lundqvist is pulled for Ranta yet again to start the third. The Rangers score in the third off a tip from Kreider, but it's too little too late. The Pens have finally clawed past the Rangers. Even though it's just a first-round win, it feels like a massive weight off their shoulders. Their reward is to play the best team in hockey. It's surprising we've avoided the Capitals for this long. The Penguins last met Ovi and company in the playoffs back in 2009, where they won in 7 games. An all-time series featuring the Crosby and Ovechkin dueling hat trick Game 2, and the Penguins fighting back from down 2-0 against their well-favored opponent. Since then, the Caps have not had much luck. They won the President's Trophy in 2010 just to get hallocked in the first round, had a goalie implosion in 2011, then began wandering the wilderness with Dale Hunter trying to get Ovechkin to play defense and Adam Oates just not being a very good coach, as they lost to the Rangers in 2012, lost to the Rangers in 2013, missed the playoffs entirely in 2014, then came back to lose to the Rangers one more time in 2015. But in that 2015 season, there were major strides made. Barry Trotz took over behind the bench, and his robust defensive systems have helped the Capitals play as a more complete team without crippling Ovechkin's dazzling offensive talent. Getting to know the Capitals roster, the obvious place to start is with Ovechkin. He's the best goal scorer in the league, bar none, and has returned to dominance after a few dud years mixed into his mid to late 20s. He, of course, is playing with Nick Backstrom, who often passes Ovi the puck and is somehow simultaneously overrated and underrated. He's not a Hall of Famer, but he's not just a guy who lucked into playing with a generational talent. He's a very good two-way top-line center. To round out the top line, the Capitals took Mark Madden's advice and traded for TJ Oshie in the offseason, though it only cost them a third, Troy Brouwer, and Phoenix Copley to get him. Oshie's scoring ability, defensive prowess, and often overlooked dirty streak personify what the Capitals have become. They score, they defend, they hit. The second line is a mix of young and old, but all are fairly new faces to DC. Mr. Game 7, veteran scorer Justin Williams, the quicker Andre Burakovsky or Marcus Johansson opposite him, and the headliner, breakout star Evgeny Kuznetsov. Kuznetsov often profiles as a mediocre player looking just at his analytics, but he brings massive value as a passer, something that isn't tracked particularly well now and especially wasn't back in 2016. The depth is more size and toughness, featuring a kid who seems to be from the wrong generation in the 21-year-old goon Tom Wilson, Daniel Winnick, Jay Beagle, Jason Chimera, and am I reading this right, Mike Richards? The Flyers and Kings guy. Huh. The defense is led by our old friend Matt Niskanen, who is a true number 1 on this team, a spectacular defender with some offensive upside. He often pairs with the big, very responsible Carl Alsner. The second pair features powerplay quarterback John Carlson alongside another familiar face in Brooks Orpik, who is starting to look pretty old out there. The third pair is often some amalgamation of puck movers Nate Schmidt and Dmitry Orlov, and yet another familiar face in Taylor Chorney. In goal, the presumptive Vezina winner, a player with dominant counting stats, rate stats, and analytics, Braden Holtby. This was a 120-point team. They aren't just good. They're the best regular season team since themselves in 2010. To get to a non-Capital team, you have to go back to the 2006 Red Wings. Steve Yzerman was on that team. The Penguins, despite their play at the end of the season and against the Rangers, are the clear underdog. Verizon Center, Game 1. The Capitals show the Penguins that they have some speed too, as Burakovsky and Chimera drive for a goal on the rush. These aren't the Rangers. It isn't until midway through the second that the Penguins respond. Nick Bonino embarrasses the Schmidt-Orlov pairing and sets up Ben Lovejoy, of all people, to tie the game. If the Penguins are going to win this series, they must take advantage when Niskanen and Alsner aren't on the ice. Here, they did just that. Malkin takes notes. On his next shift, he executes the game plan. The Capitals don't crumble. Mata turns the puck over at the offensive blue line, and TJ Oshie lasers a shot high glove side on the ensuing breakaway. It's Oshie again who breaks the tie early in the third, as Murray gives up his first truly bad goal of the playoffs. The Pens go to what I guess is technically their third line to get a response. Phil to Carl to Nick. The PCN line. Now that sucks. I'll think about it more. Late in the third, Letang loses track of a high clear from Niskanen that winds up right on Ovechkin's stick.
By Backstrom. Here comes Ovechkin. Moving it off Murray. Who makes a right pass stop.
The game heads to OT. The man of the hour wins it.
Behind the net. Wraparound attempt. They score.
Maybe Madden was onto something. Not the best game by Murray. I mean, he's a kid. He's younger than Fleury was back during his first playoff run. There's always the possibility he could get overworked or just fizzle out after a hot start. The first moment of Game 2 is an extremely late, extremely dirty hit from Orpik into the head of his former teammate Olli Maatta, knocking the young Finn out of the game and for the near future with a concussion. Unfazed, the Pens dominate the Capitals from the drop, bombarding Holtby while Murray stands unoccupied at the other end of the ice. Finally, deep into the second, the Penguins get one past Holtby, Hagelin from Bonino. It's because of this line that the Capitals can't really shelter anyone. The second they put their bottom pair on the ice, the Penguins can send out one of Crosby, Malkin, or Kessel to take advantage. It's matchup hell. Late in the period, the Capitals push. They look to have tied the game, but Kuznetsov sitting on Murray's head warrants an immediate no-goal signal from the official. Verizon Center rains boos down toward the ice. It's obvious interference. Kuznetsov is even penalized for it. The Penguins hold ever tighter to their slim lead. Early in the third, the Caps' terrifying power play gets a chance. Johansson makes the most of it.
And a shot! Johansson!
The game remains tied until the final 5 minutes when a freak tip from former Capital Eric Fehr skips over Holtby.
By Malkin again. Malkin in front! Score!
There's an audible cheer from the away fans despite the Capitals' best efforts to keep Pennsylvanians out of their arena. The injury to Maatta has put Letang out on the ice for well over 30 minutes. He shows no signs of exhaustion as the Penguins suffocate the Capitals' late-period push. The series is tied. Orpik will not make his playoff return to Pittsburgh as he's given a 3-game suspension for the hit on Maatta. Massive given the often light sentencing that is handed down in the playoffs. Orpik, being a former Penguin and generally well-respected player, owned the suspension and the hit. He clearly didn't mean to hurt Olli. Many of the Penguins are his friends, while his coach, on the other hand, whines. From Adam Gretz of CBS Sports' write-up, Trotz says to the media that while he was disappointed in the length of the suspension, he wasn't surprised, quote, based on who we're playing. Get a grip, dude. I loathe complaining in general, but especially about officiating and about suspensions. Trotz, while a legend and a great coach, loves to whine about both. Barry, you employ Tom Wilson. At this point in his career, he sucks. He's useless beyond hurting people. Maybe you should have beat the team that played an entire game with 5 defensemen if you were going to be that upset about losing Orpik. Wah. Back to Pittsburgh for Game 3, the Penguins luckily have Schultz to plug into Maatta's spot on the left side. Surprisingly, Sullivan goes with Derek Pouliot instead. Really a massive vote of confidence in the 22-year-old. Crosby's line wastes little time to open the scoring against the Capitals' best pairing. The Penguins' ability to win both best-on-best and depth matchups against the Caps has made them a terror to this point. In fact, they can even score depth on best. The Capitals' first line and the top pairing cannot be giving up goals to the Penguins' fourth line, regardless of how good Letang's pass was. The Penguins did lose Brian Rust early in the game, so the Malkin line and the fourth line have started to meld, hurting the Penguins' depth. The Capitals show a bit of pushback, but it mostly comes in the form of low-danger chances. With over 4 minutes left to play in the first, Chris Letang lays a bad hit. It's dirty, late, blindside, leaving his feet and catching the head. It's not as bad as Orpik's hit, but it's not good. Letang is given a minor for interference. Trotz looks angry, but accepting of the result. Johansson luckily returns intact. Now the Capitals are the team with righteous fury. They make a major push late in the first before Daniel Winnick tries to take justice into his own hands and gets penalized for hacking Letang. Throughout the second, instead of stomping on the gas, the Capitals try more and more to gun for Letang. Halfway through that period, Ovi runs over Letang and Backstrom accidentally knees the Penguin in the back of the head. That doesn't mean they aren't still outplaying the Penguins. They probably have double the chances throughout the second. But late in the period, Nate Schmidt, in Orpik's spot in the lineup alongside Carlson, makes a critical error. The Capitals really lock in for the third, and Murray can only hold the fort for so long. Ovechkin, with a bullet high glove side, breaks the shutout. The full force of the 120-point Capitals machine comes roaring at the Penguins. They just have to hold on. Interference by Hagelin puts the Pens down a man with just under 7 minutes left in the game. One-timer by Ovechkin, one-timer by Ovechkin, one-timer by Ovechkin, one-timer by Ovechkin. They just have to hold on. The Penguins' more offensive-minded players, Malkin and Kessel, take a back seat as Cullen and Fair take their place. They just have to hold on. A graphic flashes on the CBC broadcast. Shot attempts Ovechkin 16, Penguins forwards 19. Holtby heads to the bench. The extra attacker is on. Malkin is out on Cullen's wing. The fans cheer, but there's a nervousness about them. Ovechkin goes after Kessel for some reason. The Caps take a timeout. They finally break through. An Ovechkin shot off the post pops right to Justin Williams, who ties the game. The Penguins are on the ropes. If this game was 65 minutes long, they'd be dead in the water. But only 56 seconds remain. They just have to hold on. Down to 11 seconds left. The fans are on their feet. Hell's Bells by AC/DC rings throughout the arena. The Penguins had only 28% of the 5-on-5 expected goals in Game 3. Matt Murray just stole it. Rust is good to go for Game 4, but that's where the positive news ends. Eric Fehr is hurt with a small injury, so in his place comes Oscar Sundqvist. Minor. The crucial loss is Chris Letang. The star defenseman's hit on Marcus Johansson won't go unpunished. He's earned a 1-game suspension, which sounds about right. Greg Wyshynski tweets out the Penguins' record without Letang on the season. 2-8-1. There is no Paul Martin or Matt Niskanen to fill the number 1 role in Letang's absence. Mata likely would have been the workhorse to step up if he was healthy. Instead, the team turns to Trevor Daley and Brian Dumoulin to face the league's best team. Justin Schultz draws into the lineup in Letang's place. A freak shot from Jay Beagle early in the first period makes the situation even more dire. In response, Malkin gallops into the offensive zone for a Penguins chance that the ever-aggressive Schultz bats off the post. In maybe the biggest game of his career, Trevor Daley ties it. From a cast-off of the defending Cup champions who traded franchise icon Patrick Sharp to get him, to a number 1 defenseman on another contender in a crucial game, while his former team sits at home and watches. The Capitals take control of the game following the Daley goal, but Murray is on another planet. Early in the second, it's Cullen off the rush.
Last Stanley Cup. Here comes Cullen! Score!
A brutal pinch by Niskanen, and once again, the Pens' fourth line has scored against the Capitals' top line and top pair. Chances even out a bit, though the Capitals are beginning to notice who the weak link on the Penguins' blue line is. Derek Pouliot. Late in the second, Pouliot can't handle a puck in the corner, and Sherry, ready to counterattack, loses his man John Carlson, who rips a shot past Murray's glove. The third is up and down. Neither team really has the edge. The Capitals have a fairly decisive lead in expected goals, but I think that's a bit deceptive, as the Caps value in-tight stuff attempts that are often overvalued by XG models, while the Penguins' rush chances are often undervalued. The Penguins come out roaring in OT, and all it takes is one misplay by Mike Weber to end the game.
Sherry threw one in front. Off of Weber, shot, score!
A 3-1 series lead yet again for the Penguins. But with the series headed back to Washington, there is still work to be done. But Letang is back, and so is Fair, so there are reinforcements coming with them. The Caps go on the power play early in Game 5. They were 1 for 12 to this point in the series. Ovechkin makes it 2 for 13, whizzing a shot past Murray's left ear. The Capitals can't let go of their anti-Letang mind virus, and Backstrom finds himself in the box on a stupid interference penalty. It's Chris Kunitz who makes him pay. The two teams battle in a fast-paced game favoring the Penguins until Ian Cole puts the Capitals on the power play once again, where Oshie reestablishes their lead. It's time once again for the Capitals' usual stretch of dominance, and this time, instead of being spoiled by a Pittsburgh goal, a horrific turnover by the extremely reliable Dumoulin right to Justin Williams lengthens the Caps' lead. The Pens push in the third, but the Capitals' soon-to-be Vezina winner plays like they've needed him to all series. The Verizon Center fans send their Capitals back to Pittsburgh with rapturous applause, hoping to see them again for Game 7. The Penguins cannot let this happen. Maybe they should go to Fleury, who has recovered from his concussion. He was terrific in 14 and 15. Sullivan chooses to dance with the one who brought them this far. Matt Murray is between the pipes for what is essentially a must-win game. Mata is back too, which brings the Penguins back to full power. A graphic flashes up on the NBC broadcast early in Game 6. The Penguins are 5-10 in their last 15 series-winning opportunities. The Penguins turn to their new acquisition to be the change.
Kessel a shot. He scores!
The Holtby chants commence.
Wilson and Backstrom are among the forwards out. The other is Johansson. It's sent back along for Mata. Off Johansson.
The rest of the first and a portion of the second go by without any scoring. Near the halfway point of the game, Brooks Orpik, finally back from his suspension, slaps Patrick Hornqvist in the face with his stick and draws blood. 4-minute power play for the Penguins. They don't need all that time.
Moving on in. He scores!
Kessel, again, with a highlight reel goal.
He's still going to be sitting in there for the next 2 minutes unless Pittsburgh scores again on Barry Trotz's team.
Got it, Pierre.
Given to the outside for a shot. Score!
Kessel's line is soaring. The Capitals have no real answer for them. The Penguins are dominant until a Chris Kunitz trip puts the Capitals up a man late in the second. It's Oshie again from his office giving the Capitals a pulse heading into what could be the last period of their season. Still, in the third, it's the Penguins' game to start. But all of that changes as Justin Williams lobs a shot over Murray's glove in tight, the type of shot the Capitals had often slammed into Murray's chest throughout prior games. The desperation of both teams is palpable. Then begins a truly stupid sequence. Kunitz lobs a puck over the glass for delay of game. Damn, whatever, it happens. The Caps get a chance on the subsequent power play. There's a scramble in front, and Nick Bonino bats the puck out of the air for an attempted clear that sails over the glass. 5-on-3. The Capitals call a timeout to get their big guns rested. The Pens kill the Kunitz penalty, but immediately Ian Cole throws yet another souvenir to the crowd. 5-on-3 again. The Penguins' exhausted penalty killers finally give way. This game is tied. Will the Penguins roll over and die? No. They retaliate with a series of chances and somehow weather a late Capitals power play into overtime.
At the end, I said to Ian Cole, I said, what was that like during overtime? And he said, I got a great story for you. I said, okay, what? He said, for the first 10 minutes, we just sat here and nobody said a word. We were in total shock. And I said, well, yeah, I can see why. You guys were shooting the puck over the glass all third period. Like, yeah, of course you are. And he said, we sat there just looking at each other. No one said a word. And finally, Sidney Crosby stands up. And Sid, like, really isn't one for pep talks. He's not like a rah-rah kind of guy. He just stands up. He looks at everyone. And he says, we're better than that fucking team. Let's just end them right now. And Cole said to me, he said, I knew we were going to win when he said that.
The Penguins, as they were in Game 4, are a house of fire early in OT. Holtby makes a terrific series of saves, but it's Jay Beagle that makes what could be a legend-making block on Trevor Daley, with the Penguins halfway onto the ice ready to celebrate. The Pens keep pushing. Hagelin, Bonino, and Kessel finally break through.
Kessel up with it there. Ben one around in front. Hagelin is shot. It's over!
They've been dubbed the HBK line after wrestler Shawn Michaels, the Heartbreak Kid, and they have just broken the hearts of the NHL's regular season champions. The Penguins are on to the conference finals, desperate to dispel the embarrassment that was the 2013 sweep at the hands of the Bruins. The team they're playing, theoretically, should be the Pens' easiest opponent so far. The Tampa Bay Lightning led the league in scoring and went to the Stanley Cup final just last season, but the 2016 regular season didn't quite go the way they wanted. Teams seemed to get the book on their power play, which went from above average to cellar dwelling. Aside from that, there was just a general regression in production from multiple players, including superstar captain Steven Stamkos. When Stamkos and number 2 D-man Anton Stralman went down late in the regular season, unlikely to return until late in the playoffs at best, the Lightning should have been dead in the water, hoping to rebound next year. But the opposite happened. The Bolts had the easiest first-round matchup and clubbed the technically still on a playoff streak Red Wings, then did the same to the John Tavares-Thomas Greiss New York Islanders. So who was responsible for taking this battered squad to the conference final? The obvious answer is Ben Bishop, Tampa's gargantuan netminder who has been unbeatable through 2 rounds. He's been nearly unbeatable since being traded to Tampa in 2013. If not for Braden Holtby, Bishop would be a shoo-in for the Vezina this year and was a finalist back in 2014. He's one of the best goalies in the world, and the Lightning have given him a heavy workload to allow 21-year-old prospect Andrei Vasilevskiy more room to develop as his backup. Without Stralman, a lot of ice time has fallen on franchise defenseman Victor Hedman, who has risen to the occasion. The rest of the defense group is less inspiring. It's a bunch of third pairing or worse guys. Jason Garrison and Braden Coburn are fine. Matt Carl, Andre Schuster, and Nikita Nesterov are less than fine. Beyond Hedman, at least until they get Stralman back, the defense is not this team's strength. This team, aside from relying on their goaltending, relies pretty heavily on the top of their lineup for scoring. The triplets, Nikita Kucherov, Tyler Johnson, and Andre Palat, have blossomed into varying levels of stardom. Despite Johnson and Palat having underwhelming regular seasons, they've been crucial to the Lightning's playoff success. But the true star is the 22-year-old Russian winger. Kucherov, the youngest triplet, has clearly surpassed his former line mates and utterly dominated the Wings and Isles with 9 goals in those 10 games. Alex Killorn provides some additional two-way play and scoring. Valtteri Filppula is a sound veteran who you'd probably prefer not to be your top center in ice time, but here we are. And recently 21-year-old former third-round pick Jonathan Drouin has reached new heights here in the playoffs after missing the majority of the regular season with an injury. Like the defense, the depth up front is suspect. Brian Boyle is a good fourth liner and an third liner, which is where he's cast. Ryan Callahan is fine, but he can't score anymore. Vlad Nemesnikov isn't bad, but he's not a game breaker. The fourth line is a random smattering of guys every night, alongside the aggravating Cedric Paquette. JT Brown, Mike Blunden, Jonathan Marchessault, Eric Condra, who cares? Beyond Bishop, is there anything especially scary about this lineup? No. With the Pens on home ice, no one really thinks the Lightning have a chance here unless there's some sort of goaltending miracle. The first great chance of the series comes about halfway through the first period as Sherry, Hornqvist, and Crosby swarm around the Tampa net. As the puck is speared out of danger by Victor Hedman, Bishop lays in a heap in the blue paint, clutching his leg. He lost his footing in the scramble and came down hard. It looks bad. ACL? MCL? Broken leg? Bishop is in clear anguish as members of both teams' training staffs load him onto a stretcher. Ben Bishop has long been one of my favorite goalies. He's great, and I obviously would prefer he didn't receive a seemingly horrific non-contact injury, but this is over. Without Bishop, the Lightning don't have a chance. Andrei Vasilevskiy was a first-round pick a couple years ago, but he's not really shown much at the NHL level. There's no way he can fill Bishop's literally massive shoes. The Penguins clearly have the edge in opportunities throughout the rest of the first, but all it takes to ruin everything is one terrific pass from Victor Hedman.
He pulls free! Save, score! It slips through!
The Lightning's jubilation is short-lived as a run-of-the-mill hit from Chris Kunitz sends Tyler Johnson hobbling for the dressing room early. But early in the second, it's the Lightning again, with Andre Palat continuing their never-say-die mentality. The Penguins get chances, but Vasilevskiy plays a solid period. Late in the second, a Dumoulin turnover and Letang pinch leads to a 3-on-1 headed toward Murray. He has no chance thanks to a perfect pass and shoot by Palat and Drouin. But the period isn't over. Hornqvist, with some help by Braden Coburn, fires one past Vasilevskiy. The dam is broken, you'd think, right? The third period is instead a showing of just how good Lightning coach John Cooper is. The Lightning gum up the game with their neutral zone play, taking as many whistles as possible to slow the Penguins' potent rush attack. The Penguins get a power play late after a nasty hit by Palat, but the largely untested Vasilevskiy slams the door. Without their best forward, second best defenseman, and star goalie, the Lightning have stolen Game 1 in Pittsburgh. Fortunately for Bishop, his injury isn't actually all that severe. He may even be able to return if the Bolts make the final. But for now, the net belongs to Vasilevskiy. Modest play in Game 1, particularly on Killorn's goal, earns him a seat in the press box, drawing back in the more situational Schultz. In Game 2, despite the Lightning getting Anton Stralman back, the Penguins don't mess around. See, this is exactly what should have been happening. You just can't let Tampa get the lead, and you can steamroll them. But the Lightning are like roaches. Late in the opening frame, Jonathan Marchessault sends a beautiful pass to Anton Stralman that he knuckles up over Murray's glove. Still, shots are 14-7. This is all Penguins.
Hands on to Drouin, moving up with Filppula, and the shot, he scores!
You gotta have that one, man. The Penguins spend the next 2 periods slamming their heads against the wall, owning the chances, but Vasilevsky is incredible. It turns out the Lightning had a second world-class goaltender on their team. In overtime, when his team needs him the most, Sid rises to the occasion.
And here's Rust. Rust delays to Crosby. Stop!
Game 3 is just a continuation of the latter periods of Game 2. The Penguins own the ice, skating circles around the Lightning, but Vasilevsky continues to shut the door. It isn't until the waning moments of the second frame that the Penguins finally break through. Kessel and Hagelin are just too fast. In the third, it's more HBK as Kessel buries his 7th goal of the playoffs. But again, roaches.
Drops it on to Johnson. Score!
It takes Sid to squash them.
Crosby has a man in front, Kessel. It's Crosby, a shot, he scores! Crosby!
Kunitz adds a second goal that Vasilevsky had no chance on 3 minutes later, rendering Palat's late glove side tally moot. Pierre Maguire asks the man of honor Phil Kessel the real hard-hitting questions in the postgame.
How's your breath?
It's not good, eh?
No, I meant in terms of conditioning.
Oh.
The Pens are up in the series. Game 1 was a fluke. The Lightning aren't bad by any means, but it's time to put this series to bed. The Lightning put the Penguins on their heels immediately and play their best game of the series so far. Andre Schuster continues the push. With Vasilevsky behind a team playing at this level, the Pens are in danger. The second doesn't go much better. Ryan Callahan lays a perfectly clean hit on Trevor Daley, who breaks his ankle. The Pens' number 2 guy, who rose to the occasion so well in Letang's absence, is done for the season. With Daley out, Schultz is forced onto the PK unit, where he loses his man Jonathan Drouin to make it 3-0. A freak bounce hops over Murray's glove late in the same period. 4-0. Hey, man, I've been trying to not say anything about it because you've been playing so well. At least until this series. But your glove is horrible. I'm not sure the league has figured it out quite yet, but that's probably something to work on going forward. Sullivan plays the card he's been sitting on for a while now. He puts in Fleury to start the third. Kessel quickly puts the Pens on the comeback trail. Fleury does all that's asked of him as his team wakes up with Malkin and Kunitz scoring to bring the Penguins within 1 with plenty of time left. But Vasilevsky, once again, lifts his team past the surging Penguins despite their monstrous third period. The series is tied. With Daley out, Mott addresses for the first time since Game 1. Sherry is scratched for Bo Bennett, not sure about that one, and Shawn Michaels is at Consol Energy Center. But those aren't the only lineup changes. Mike Sullivan goes to his veteran goalie, Marc-Andre Fleury, for a crucial Game 5. Fleury just had the 2 best seasons of his career. He's blossomed into an elite goalie that only lost his spot because of injury and the hot hand of Matt Murray. Fleury is also the same guy that imploded for 4 straight postseasons not that long ago, once against some of these same Lightning. It's a tough call. Murray hasn't been great in this series, but that's a lot of weight on Mark's shoulders. It's a good time for Dumoulin's first of the year.
From Hedman to the net, stopped by Vasilevsky. The rebound, they score with a second left.
Early in the second, the makeshift Hagelin, Crosby, Hornqvist line strikes to make it 2-0. They gave you some breathing room, Mark. Game 4 wasn't a massive title shift, as here in Game 5, the Penguins have taken over the scoring chances once again. A picture-perfect shot from Alex Killorn gets Tampa Bay right back in it. Fleury bears more blame on the tying goal as he comes out way too far and gets burned on a coast-to-coast pass. But there's Olli Maatta, making one of the best plays of his life to help set up a Chris Kunitz goal to end the second.
Hook the puck in front. Malkin is there. Turns, shoots. Vasilevsky escapes. They score.
The Penguins fans are as vocal as ever for the third, often dissatisfied with the officiating. CBC puts on the screen that the Penguins are 46-0 when leading after 2 throughout the regular season and playoffs. In the final minutes of the period, the Lightning look to their star to challenge that record.
Johnson to the net. Curry the save. A wraparound attempt. Kucherov scores.
The game heads for another very short overtime. This time it's Tyler Johnson who is hit with a Jason Garrison shot, directing the puck past Fleury. For the first time in these playoffs, the Penguins will face elimination. Back against the wall, headed back to Tampa, Sullivan goes back to his guys. Connor Sherry will draw in for Bo Bennett, and Matt Murray will start in net. And it looks like Game 6 has gotten off to a horrific start as the red-hot Jonathan Drouin scores to make it 1-0. But it comes back. Offside review is pretty annoying, and this play wouldn't even be offside under the current rules, but hey, they got it right. The story of the series plays out in the rest of the period. The Penguins own the possession game, but they can't finish. If only they'd gotten one of the NHL's deadliest scorers in the offseason. Wait a second.
Crosby to Kessel, scores!
Renowned loser Phil Kessel has scored a massive goal in an elimination game to fire up his team. Despite his disallowed goal, Drouin is still flying. In the second, he cuts in, but is stuffed by Ben Lovejoy. The play drives the other way, and Chris Letang scores through a Matt Carle screen. The Bolts aren't completely run over, though. They get chances, but Matt Murray is returned to form. Late in the second, to solidify his team's lead, Crosby scores what is probably his signature goal of these playoffs.
And they take the puck back from them again. Here's Sidney Crosby, gets open, he shoots, he scores!
It looks like the Penguins have at least this game in the bag, but as I've said 1,000 times, the Lightning are relentless. It doesn't help that Phil puts their first one in for them. Brian Boyle, the man credited on the Phil goal, shoots one in himself minutes later. The game is back on. The Penguins have been outplayed in maybe their last period of hockey. They have to get back to their game. The Penguins look to their speed and counterattacking ability. When the Bolts overcommit, Brian Rust is off to the races.
Deeks and scores!
Nick Bonino lobs a puck into Tampa's empty net in the game's final minute to solidify a 5-2 Penguins win and send the series back to Pittsburgh. Murray finishes the night with 28 saves on 30 shots, stopping almost exactly what the XG models expected him to. Game 7, Consol Energy Center, and somehow, some way, Steven Stamkos is back. Assuming he can still shoot the puck, his return is a massive boon for the team. Right from the drop, the Penguins don't give the Lightning a chance to breathe. Murray is barely tested while Vasilevsky plays like a madman at the other end. The fans get more and more restless. Something has to give. Finally, early in the second, Kunitz once again finds Brian Rust. Kunitz, Malkin, Rust, though they haven't been on the score sheet as frequently as Sid's line or HBK, have been the Penguins' best possession line by a huge margin. Part of that is them getting easier matchups, but still, they will finish the playoffs with a 68.9 XG share at 5-on-5. That's preposterous. But Tampa just won't die. Drouin strikes again just a few minutes later on a good shot, but one Murray probably should have had. The game stays tied for all of 30 seconds.
One that went wide, off the board.
The Penguins' major key goal horn rings through Consol Energy Center as Brian Rust has made himself a legend. Against the Caps, the Pens found success by getting the lead and retracting into their shell. That hasn't worked against Tampa, so in Game 7, the Pens stomp on the gas. They bombard Vasilevsky, who doesn't budge, but he's already given up the game winner. The Penguins drive the puck into the corner as the final seconds of the third period trickle away. They have made it back to the Stanley Cup final. "We want the cup," is the crowd's chant. As he did in 2009, Crosby lifts the Prince of Wales trophy, a supposed jinx he hasn't adhered to since prior to the 2008 final loss.
That Game 7, the Penguins won 2-1, two Brian Rust goals. They were never going to lose that game. They were so much better than Tampa in that game. It wasn't even close. It was the most one-sided 7-game series I've ever seen, and yet it was 3-2 Tampa after Game 5.
Yeah.
And that's why I always maintain. In the Crosby-Malkin era, I actually think Game 6 in Tampa was the biggest game they ever played. I know they'd already won a cup, but they were one-hit wonders at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And even though we knew how good they were by 16, they still had to win another one. And they had choked in the playoffs year after year after year. And they're down 3-2 in a series they should be winning. That Tampa team was no joke. I tell this story a lot. When I walked out of the locker room after the morning skate, I was the last member of the media out of the locker room the morning of Game 6. And I turned around and looked, and I see the only two people in the room were Crosby and Malkin. And they were sitting beside each other, just staring straight into space, like whatever you consider a game face, it was like times 10. And they were both like, I actually walked out of the locker room and I called somebody and I said, they're going to win tonight. And what do you mean? I said, if you could have seen, we're not allowed to take pictures in the locker rooms. I said, if I could have, I would have taken a picture of Sid and Gino sitting there. They're not losing tonight. They were like, that was like a career defining night for them.
The Penguins, having overcome their toughest challenge yet, will face the San Jose Sharks for the Stanley Cup. Like the Penguins, the Sharks heated up down the stretch and were probably a better team than their 98-point record implied, but overall, they're much more like the Capitals. Since Joe Thornton joined the Sharks midway through the 2006 season and won his MVP, the Sharks have been a sterling regular season team that just could not get it done in the playoffs. They lost to great teams like the 2007 Red Wings, 2010 Blackhawks, 2011 Canucks, 2014 Kings. They lost to not-so-great teams like the 2006 Oilers and 2009 Ducks. They've made it to the conference final twice since the lockout, but this is the first time in franchise history they've reached the Stanley Cup final. Just last year, they missed the playoffs entirely. They didn't get great goaltending, the defense wasn't special, particularly in its own end, and it was just starting to seem like Thornton and Marleau didn't have the juice to be the stars anymore. But one goalie change, a defensive facelift, and youth injection later, here they are, in the Stanley Cup final. So let's meet the Sharks. I mentioned Thornton already, and he's in the midst of a massive renaissance season, hitting the point-per-game mark for the first time since 2010. He's moved to the wing on a more full-time basis, and his two line mates have had a lot to do with that bounce back. Young Tomas Hertl brings his terrific skill set, while not enough can be said about Joe Pavelski. He's genuinely one of the best all-around players in the league. Great defensively, great scoring ability, and a power play demon. He's the Sharks' best player, or at least he was until the playoffs. Logan Couture has gone positively nuclear in the playoffs with 8 goals and 24 points in 18 games. He plays mostly with 36-year-old 20-goal scorer Patrick Marleau and breakout rookie Jonas Donskoy. The young and old combination continues on their third line with the 35-year-old late bloomer Joel Ward and the more fleet-of-foot sophomores Chris Tierney and Melker Karlsson. The fourth line is a typical fourth line. Hard checking and penalty killers and Tommy Wengels, Dinas Zubris, the currently injured Matt Nieto, and, oh, hey Nick, how'd you get over here? Rover Brent Burns is obviously the keystone of the blue line despite his defensive deficiencies. However, in the offseason, the Sharks acquired the perfect partner for their all-offense number 1, Paul Martin. He's been forced to be a bit of a babysitter for Burns, so he's playing a more conservative game, but he's still a great defender. He's not quite as good, though, as the Sharks' other elite defender, Marc-Edouard Vlasic. I feel like because of the contract he has now, people forget about just how good Vlasic was. For you younger viewers, think about Jacob Slavin as a good current-day comparison. Here in 2016, Vlasic is probably the best matchup defenseman in the league, and his partner Justin Braun is no slouch. The problem here for the Sharks is who do they use their matchup pairing against? The Penguins' best players line? Their top scoring line? Or their best possession line? The third pairing is meh. Brendan Dillon is okay. The Sharks bolstered their blue line at the deadline, bringing in Roman Polak in the same trade that got them Smalling, but Roman Polak isn't very good. In fact, the guy they benched for Polak, rookie Dylan DeMello, is much better. But Polak big, DeMello small. In goal, the Sharks gambled a bit in the offseason, picking up Kings backup Martin Jones to take over the crease from Antti Niemi. Getting a Kings backup worked out for the Leafs with Jonathan Bernier, at least I assume that's true, I haven't looked at the stats. The Jones dice roll hit for the Sharks this season. He's been perfectly solid. He's gotten better throughout the playoffs. He shut out the Predators in Game 7 of the second round, then shut out the Blues in Games 2 and 3 of the conference finals. To be fair, he's probably the worst goalie the Penguins have faced so far, given they've faced a Hall of Famer, Vezina winner, and future Vezina winner, but he's perfectly good. Going into Game 1, the Sharks are seen as the clear favorite. Why? I remember thinking this at the time, like seriously. Why? Who did the Sharks beat? The rapidly aging Kings? The not great Predators? The Blues, who, while good, had their goalies burst into flames? Were any of those teams better than even the Rangers? Let alone the Capitals. The Sharks were a 98-point team in the regular season. What are we doing here? Yeah, the Sharks are playing well, but their underlyings are nothing special. They're a good team. But I still don't understand why the Penguins are seen as the underdog in this matchup. As Jeff Jimerson sings the national anthem to open Game 1 in Pittsburgh, the legacy of the Penguins' big three stars hangs in the balance, juxtaposing the legacy of Joe Thornton and Patrick Marleau. The Sharks, unaccustomed to the Eastern Conference speed game, are on their heels from the drop. A bad pinch from Braun allows Schultz to jump into the play, and Brian Rust continues his playoff breakout. As an aside, in sheltered minutes, with Jacques Martin reining in his worst tendencies and Ian Cole as a supervisor, Justin Schultz has been really good. He's showing the flashes he had in Edmonton, just without the blatant defensive incompetence. Connor Sherry strikes while the iron is hot, so that's 2 goals against the Vlasic-Braun pair. They're very good, but they aren't especially fast, and in this series, they need to be. The Sharks' deadly power play gets a goal back in the second. San Jose has a much better period overall. In the final 2 minutes of the frame, Couture and Marleau isolate Mata, and the veteran ties the game with a wraparound. The Penguins, with their laurel resting disturbed, take over in the third, especially the second half of the period. But Martin Jones is locked in. It's going to be like this again. The Penguins' biggest goal in the postseason, overtime Game 6 against the Caps, was scored by Nick Bonino. With the Penguins unable to break Jones, it's Bonino time again.
Still they battle in front. Score!
But there's Ben Lovejoy, who has had an invisible playoff, and I mean that as the highest form of praise, in the box for the final 2 minutes of the game. The Sharks have, as I said, an elite power play. The Penguins completely clamp them. The game rarely felt in doubt for the Pens despite the tight score. If they can just keep this up. In Game 2, it's pretty clear that the Penguins are the better possession team. Only the Caps have been able to have a solid XG split against the Pens. The Sharks are a great team, but even they can't really suppress Pittsburgh, relying on Jones to bail them out. The first goes by without a goal, but in the second, the Penguins' leading scorer gives them the lead.
Take the gift pass, and then it's given away. Bonino, score!
The Sharks are in a tough spot. They have to play Polak and Dillon against somebody. But the Penguins' depth, here with the HBK line, doesn't really let the Sharks shield anyone. It's the same thing that killed the Rangers, Capitals, and Lightning. The Penguins' forward depth, their elite talent depth, is nigh unstoppable. It's a very low-scoring affair. Both Murray and Jones are putting together strong games. It takes until very late in the third for another goal to be scored. Logan Couture is a beast. He really outmuscles Dumoulin down low to throw a puck up to Braun, whose seeing eye shot sneaks by 6 skaters and Murray to tie the game. I know I've emphasized that I think the Penguins are the better team, but the Sharks are a genuinely great team. They aren't pushovers. They're going to give the Penguins a fight. The game reaches extra time, but it's short-lived as Connor Sherry finds open space.
Waits and gave it on over to Sherry. A shot, he scored!
The Penguins are completely and utterly in control of the series headed to San Jose. Early in Game 3, it looks like the Penguins are going to put the series away quickly.
To the inboards. Lovejoy with a shot. He scores!
But the Sharks have an equally unlikely goal scorer in their back pocket.
To the blue line. Braun takes the shot. He scores!
Murray never saw it. On home ice, the Sharks play up to their opponents, evening the chances for the first time in the series. San Jose shows more snarl, too. Burns and Thornton in particular are always giving Murray an extra chop or giving an extra face wash in scrums. But late in the second, the Penguins take back their lead as Hornqvist tips home a shot from Lovejoy. That's it. That's the backbreaker. With SAP center behind them and their backs against the wall, the Sharks push back. Joel Ward blasts a shot through Murray to tie the game, and the Sharks have life. The rest of the third is fairly low event, which favors the slower Sharks. They aren't going to beat the Pens in a track meet. The Pens aren't playing their normal aggressive style, as the next goal will likely win the game, so into overtime we go. Jonas Donskoy scores a terrific goal to make this a real series. Why am I not worried? No, seriously. This team has gone up in flames in front of me in a variety of ways time and time again. These Sharks are good, they're better than Tampa, and I was way more concerned about the Lightning. Why do I still feel like this series is over? Like the hardest part is already behind us. In Game 4, Phil Kessel demonstrates just what elite talent means. The Sharks collapse on Phil, surrounding him and forcing him to take a low-danger shot that bounces right off the blocker of Martin Jones and right to Ian Cole, who scores his first goal of the season. The Sharks actually play the best game they've played all series. They dominate the chances. Murray, who wasn't at his best in Game 3, gives them nothing. The broadcaster reminds us that the Sharks haven't led for a single second in the series. In the second, the Penguins have Malkin, the only Penn star the Sharks have been able to stop. Well, until now. It takes until late in the third for the Sharks to finally break through, but Martin Jones chose a bad time to have his worst game of the series. The Penguins are up 3-1 in the series, headed back to Pittsburgh. They've never won a cup on home ice. Each one of their 3 wins were on the road.
Everyone in Pittsburgh thought they were going to win, and the whole city just literally showed up around the arena and just watched it on TV there. It was incredible. I'll never forget walking into the press box about an hour before the game. I'm on the arena floor level. Mike Sullivan and Rick Tocchet walk past me. And Tocchet says, "Hey, is there really like a ton of people outside?" He said, "We've been here all day, so we don't really know." And I just taken a picture of it. I pull up my phone and I show them a picture, and Sullivan's eyes get about that big. He's like, "Oh my God." And it literally affected the Penguins. I mean, it really did.
With emotions as high as they could be, the first period of Game 5 is chaos. Brent Burns, who hadn't asserted his offensive dominance to this point, follows Donskoy's example from Game 4 and scores the same goal. The Sharks continue to take advantage of the parade planning Penguins as Logan Couture tips one past Murray to put the Sharks up 2-0 just 3 minutes into the game. The Penguins get a grip and take control. Malkin scores a cerebral or lucky goal less than 2 minutes later. 22 seconds after that.
Walked on by Bonino, and a shot score!
This is a team that isn't just giving everything they can to win. They know they're going to win. But Melker Karlsson changes all of that.
Now for Dylan. Shoved one around in front, and a shot score!
Okay, guys, we've been over this. Logan Couture is very good. Matt, please catch the puck. Thanks. The Pens bombard Jones throughout the rest of the game, but he's outstanding. The second and third periods are all Pittsburgh. They finish the game with 46 shots. Jones makes 44 saves. The hope of winning Game 5 on home ice is snuffed out by terrific goaltending. The Penguins stick to their Game 5 game plan in Game 6 with the hope of being accompanied by the Stanley Cup on their next trip to Pittsburgh. I remember where I was. I was flying down the back roads by my house, coming home from some commitment, a friend's grad party maybe. I was listening on the radio, and I heard Mike Lang call out the Penguins' first goal.
To the right point it goes to Schultz, left side to Dumoulin. A slapper score! Brian Dumoulin let it go, and the Pens have taken a 1-0.
But one of the only Sharks to show up to the series ties it. It takes the Penguins a little while to respond. 1 minute and 19 seconds.
Taken by Crosby. A shot score! It's Letang!
The Pens don't leave off the gas. They own the Sharks. Murray stops the few shots that come his way. In the final minutes, with the Sharks goalie pulled, Vlasic tees up a shot, throwing it toward the net in hope of it being tipped. In front of him is Sidney Crosby. Sid has been through so much. He won so early in his career. Before he knew how hard it was to win. How hard it was to come back from the injuries he's battled. How hard it was to not just get to the top, but stay there. Patrick Hornqvist, the embodiment of the change Jim Rutherford wanted for this team. Heart and soul, the kind of player you put on the ice with the Stanley Cup on the line.
Sit there, shovels one, knocked down by Crosby, sent back out now to Hornqvist. Hornqvist with the net empty. He scores!
The last minute ticks away.
And the Pittsburgh Penguins have won the Stanley Cup.
Trevor Daley, Kevin Porter, Scott Wilson, and yes, Pascal Dupuis pour onto the ice to celebrate. The Penguins have done it.
Would you say then that the 2016 Cup was the most important for the legacy of this group?
Yes, 100%. I've always believed that. And it's the one that we don't talk about as much, I think, because the 2009 Cup in Detroit, the way they won it, to win Game 7 against that Red Wings team with Fleury making this, it's so memorable. It was the first time the Penguins won the Cup in 17 years. Like, you never forget about that. In the 17 Cup, to go back-to-back without Letang, when that team was out of gas and they just wouldn't die. Kunitz scores the legendary goal in double overtime in Game 7. So we talk about those 2 years, I think, in a more romantic way, and understandably so. But we must remember they went 7 years in between cups. and they choked playoff series away, and they looked vulnerable. And we all wondered, like, is the window closing on this team? Like, now it is all these years later, but even back then we were like, is the window closing? Like what's going on with these guys? So that 16 Cup changed everything. That gave Sid and Gino multiple rings. That puts you in a different category. The all-time greats, Mario, Gretzky, or Hal, they got multiple rings. You have to do that. And so that one to me just reaffirmed who they were, that they were probably the team of their generation.
The legacy of the big three Penguin stars, chief among them Conn Smythe winner and captain Sidney Crosby, has been solidified. Phil Kessel is a Stanley Cup champion. This is where our part of the story ends. The Penguins go on to win the next year with largely the same team, riding Dumoulin and veteran wonder Ron Hainsey due to an injury to Letang. Fleury gets his moment in what is his final season as a Penguin. Sid wins his second Conn Smythe, the first back-to-back of the Cap era. Now let's go back to 2014 for a second. Ray Shero, with his job on the line, had a trade offer on the table. Brandon Sutter, Brian Dumoulin, and a first that became Kasperi Kapanen for Ryan Kesler. Say he mortgages the future to get Kesler. The Penguins probably make the conference final in 2014. Shero probably doesn't get the axe, and the team probably continues on the same path, winning occasional rounds but never really getting to the finish line. Instead, Shero gets canned. Rutherford trades Sutter for Bonino. Dumoulin becomes a cornerstone of the franchise, and they don't win 2 cups without him. And Kapanen is a key piece of the Kessel trade. Why didn't Shero do it? He could have saved his own skin. So what if it didn't work out? It'd have been someone else's problem anyway. But he didn't. And the Penguins won 2 Stanley Cups with Bonino and Dumoulin and Kessel in tow. The legacy built by these cups solidified hockey in Pittsburgh beyond a shadow of a doubt, which wasn't the case when Crosby was drafted. 1 cup is one thing, but building a dynasty after 6 years of blah is another. It's almost like the Penguins have cups in 3 generations, or at least 2.5. Only 5 guys remained in 2016 from the 2009 team: Crosby, Malkin, Letang, Fleury, and Kunitz. As I was writing this, Crosby signed his extension that solidified him as a Penguin for life, as if that was ever in doubt. He, Malkin, and Letang have carved out a permanent legacy for themselves in the city of Pittsburgh. The 2016 Cup took them, Crosby chief among them, from great players to legends in their city, and in the mind of the 10-year-old kid from central Pennsylvania who was there in 2009, forever.